Welcome to Proposals and Contracts. This presentation is specifically for private patrol operators. Due to its length of this presentation, I actually divided this presentation into 4 different parts. The first part is how to calculate a bid. And when I talk about bid, I'm also referring to solicitations, and I'm also referring to the word proposal. All of these words are used interchangeably in this presentation. The first consideration we'll talk about is the significance of operating expenses. We'll talk about wage research through the EDD. We'll talk about a formula that I have adopted. It's called the Livingston formula, and it's a 55 to 65% formula that I will be discussing soon. Talk about using websites for research, and the emphasis is going to be wages and benefits. Most of the billing rate is going to come out of wages and benefits, and that's why we're going to discuss so much of that subject in this presentation. In fact, we are going to go well into an hour just talking about wages and benefits. We'll talk about billing rate research, and I'm going to give you a case study from the Department of General Services. This is an actual contract that was approved by them. We're going to talk about the Stanless County Master Agreement. And the significance of this agreement is there is discussion involving minimum wage. Okay? That discussion is actually terms of the agreement. And let's see what that case study has to do with our work as private patrol operators. And we're going to talk about the UC Berkeley Labor Center website. This is an excellent tool that we are going to use to help us understand what a livable wage is. We're going to talk about a San Francisco Municipal Transportation Authority agreement. It's a case study, and it also involves wages, benefits, and labor unions. We'll talk about ethics for billing rate analysis. This is a fancy phrase for competition spying. Talk about other overhead costs that you might incur in your billing rate. And the second consideration is pending or current legislation affecting your overhead cost. We'll talk about pandemics. And another third consideration is going to be what the client needs from you, your knowledge, skills, and abilities for a particular contract. Fourth consideration is going to consider the knowledge, skills, and abilities a client seeks. And then part 2, we'll talk about proposals to contract. We'll talk about definition of a proposal. What is it? We're going to use a strategy called the Q-tips method, and it's a legal analysis method. Talk about the elements of a legally enforceable contract. I have a learning exercise for you all, and it's going to be reviewing a contract, or a contract in quotation mark, because it might not even be a contract depending on what you guys think about it. We're going to talk about breach of contract, talk about subcontracting, and then part 3, we're going to dwell into post orders. We'll talk about the content of a post order and what are the elements of a good post order. Is room for a great discussion. Part 4, we'll be talking about introduction to government contracts. Talk about cities, municipalities, counties, state government, federal government, special districts that include college and universities, school districts, water district, a transit district, and we're going to have to exclude private bidding. Well, just because there really isn't a private bidding process. The competitive process is mostly for government work. We'll talk about government bid process, market intelligence, ethics. Welcome to part 1, how to calculate a bid or a quote. First consideration in how to calculate a bid or quote. You must first consider what your overhead cost is going to be. And when I say overhead cost, I'm referring to the expenses that's not directly connected to the service or product. And most of the overhead costs, well, I say well over 50%, will have an effect on your bid. Overhead costs affect a bid because you may need to bid higher to pay for your employees' wages, benefits, or other overhead costs. And understanding how much you will pay an employee affects your billing rate. But before then, you need to understand how to research employee wages. I'm going to give you some examples of overhead cost, and our concern is wages and benefits of personnel. Most of the amount of the billable rate is going to go into wages and benefits in all contracts. We're going to focus our attention to the 2020 version of the California Occupational Guide, and that is published by the California Employment Development Department. And what you're going to find out very shortly is that the median pay in the 50th percentile is $31,541 a year, which is also $15.16 an hour for the average security guard in the state of California. And let me show you a video on the next slide to show you how to access the Occupational Guide. If you want to get to the Occupational Guide, you're going to have to find the correct website address. And here we're going to use labormarketinfo.ed.cal.gov. This is a government website hosted by the Employment Development Department, State of California, also known as the EDD. Mind you that over the years, this website address can change. We're going to scroll down to where it says Online Services, and then it says California Occupational Guides. And I prefer that you do a keyword search, and in number one, we'll type in security guard. Mind you that if you type in security officer, there are IT, internet technology, information technology professions that also use the job category of security officer to define somebody who protects an organization against a cyber attack. So if you use security officer, you might land on those types of occupations. So we're going to be just simple and type in security guard. When we click find, there's going to be a prompt of different categories, and we'll pick security guards. Okay, and here it says choose your county from the list. You can pick California, or you can pick any of the specific 58 counties that the state of California has. But for this presentation, we're going to just keep it simple and click California. And then we'll click view the guide. And what I like here is tells us what exactly they do. And you can actually copy a lot of this information and then transfer it into your job description when you look for that market of private security guards who are potential employees. You put this on you attach a job description with the application, and you can use a lot of the information that's provided here. So right here it says task. A lot of this information here you could just copy and paste it into your own job description. Here it says here skill used in this task. Okay, I like how it mentions that on this task the security guards are doing problem solving, they're doing inductive reasoning, monitoring, writing, speaking, social perspectiveness, active listening, public safety and security, selective attention. Really important information that you can definitely include on the job description when you go out and seek your security guard force. And then working conditions, you can also use this. Okay, and this is pretty neat. It tells you what kind of benefits security guards can expect in the state of California. So this is annual wages for 2020, whatever current year it is. They update it most likely every year. You'll get an update. So it might take a while for 2021 to update, in 2002 and then 23. Just be patient. What I recommend is, if this is not the current year, if you add about 1.5% as a form of cost of living to the salary that is defined here, it'll give you more or less a ballpark figure that you can work with. So it says here, lower percentage, the 25th percentile, they're getting 27,657. And this is what our private security guards are reporting based on surveys. And then median is 31,541, and the higher percentile, they're getting 38,463. For all intents and purposes, in this whole presentation, we will use this median salary here of $31,541. Okay, and from here, you're going to click right here where it says View Wages for all areas. So here we are. We landed on the page, and look at where it says Geography. We have the list of all the counties in the state of California that reported to the EDD. See where it says median hourly, California? In general terms, 1516 is what the median hourly rate is in California, and I will use this when we analyze billing cost in the presentations that are yet to follow. Right here, median annually. So every year they're getting around 31,541 in the median range. And what I think what they did is they used 26 pay periods. So if you get 26 pay periods, or the number 26, and well, if you get $15.16 and you times it by 80 for biweekly pay, and then times that by 26, you'll get a ballpark figure of around here. I think they're a little bit off, but it's just a little bit, and it's somewhere in this figure here. Okay. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, some counties are going to pay more than others. Imperial County pays one of the lowest, and I would imagine San Francisco would probably pay more. Yeah, they're $18.77 and then $39,000 a year on average. Obviously, the cost of living is way more. So whatever county you're going to have your guards operate in, I think this is a really good resource that you can fall back on. This is the link if you want to review it on your own. There's a portent calculation formula that I want to discuss, but before I dwell further into this, I just want to let you know that I'm not setting an industry standard or any type of recommended wage, and it's dangerous to set an industry pay standard. There's so many different factors to consider when you consider experience, training, risk, the cost of living, whether this is armed or unarmed security post, but this formula can give you a number to start off with. So on your right, the picture that just popped up, that's Grayling Livingston, and he's the founder and president of Get a Security Quote. Is www.gasq.us. And the interesting thing about Mr. Livingston is he has a lot of communication between clients and private security contractors. He's the bridge of communication between both of them. And he started this interesting company where if you're a client and you search on the internet for security services, he will connect the clients to the actual vendors. And in doing so, he's able to understand what some of the overhead costs are. Well, actually, most of the overhead costs are. He developed this formula on his website, and that formula is a 55 to 65% of the total bill rate, and that rate is paid to the security officer in the form of wages and also in the form of benefits, medical insurance. So what I did is this. I chose a number, an hourly wage, actually a billable wage, and then I times it by 55% until I was able to get the average or the median wage in the state of California for the year 2020. Notice this number is going to always change over time. And what we found is a $27.55 an hour is the average contract rate in the state of California when you consider Mr. Livingston's formula. Again, I want to reiterate that this is not an industry standard. This is a percentage of the total bill that Mr. Livingston briefly spoke about on his website, but it's something that we can use as a baseline to develop a quote. Let's be clear on that. You don't always have to look into an agreement or a contract between a public agency and a private patrol operator company to see what the current industry standards for the pay rate is for your guards, or even the billable rate. You can even seek some advice from private websites. So according to thumbtack.com, an unarmed security guard with advanced skills and experience are paid between $30 an hour and $35 an hour. Advanced skills, this could mean maybe hand-to-hand combat skills, maybe some type of other de-escalation training that they receive. Maybe they received all the 40 hours of training that the state of California requires, and maybe much more. They weren't really too specific on that. An armed guard with advanced skills can expect between $35 an hour to $45 an hour. Whenever you're talking about armed guards, you want to market up the billing rate, even the hourly rate, somewhere between $5 and $10 an hour. Now, according to Thumbtack, they suggested $3 to $5 an hour when you consider an unarmed versus armed. And according to BOS Security, an experienced guard with advanced skills can command as much as $35 an hour all the way up to $50 an hour. I mean, there's a spread there. And they recommend that when there's armed security, you're going to easily tack on $5 to $10 an hour. And I think that's very common. And according to the Security Guard Training Center, guards are usually paid between $14 an hour to $30 an hour. And that can definitely vary based on knowledge, skills, and abilities of the guard, and also what the contract rate is. The only thing that I don't like about private sources of information, like private websites that are selling security services, is that the number that they give you on the website could be a little bit biased, because maybe they're trying to sell you a particular service that's maybe on the higher end of things, on the higher rate scale, and because of that, they'll actually push the range up to the higher end, or a range that's higher than what they normally propose. So let's just say their normal rate is $35 an hour. They might mention on the website that security guards are typically paid between $30 an hour and $80 an hour. So you're figuring, okay, well, it's all up to $80. If I'm paying for $35, I'm getting a deal. That's the only thing that we need to be suspicious on. I'm not saying that any of these websites are suspicious. I'm just saying that when you go out there and do your market research, you got to be really careful on your source of information. The official state of California CalJobs website. Here is the address that you need to type into the address bar. And when you land here on CalJobs, my recommendation is you just type in security guard. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find out what other employers, what other private patrol operators are currently paying their employees. Why is that so important? Well, if you want to be competitive, you want to be a competitive employer, you got to pay in a competitive manner. And this is one of many ways of doing your research. So I just type in security guards and then I just put California. If you just type in security guards without a city or state, you'll land on a page just like this. Mind you, if you have a particular city where you are hiring, make sure that you put that in just so that you can get the current average pay rate. Okay, so here, this company, Tristan Security Services in Torrance, they're paying 18 to 25 an hour. Another company, all the same one actually. And there's actually a feature that we can use that will narrow results. Many companies here do not show the pay. What happens is the state of California will post a regular pay or a median pay for a similar job, but that's not what we want. We want specific numbers. So what's the salary? I like to type in here 40,000 and up, or you could do 20,000 and up. It just depends on your preference. Let's see what they're paying. And the thing is, whenever you type in guard, many times you get U.S. Army National Guard recruiters trying to recruit military personnel. So that's another drawback of typing in guards. That's why you gotta be a little bit more specific, and you can put private security officer, or you could put security guards, and just make sure that you skip the search results that state USA Jobs Government. Okay, so G4S, for a site supervisor in San Mateo, they're paying $76,000 a year. This is probably a government contract. That's why it pays so great. G4S in San Francisco, they're paying they're paying $21.34 an hour. And this is the problem. Whenever you type in security or any words that sound like that, you get private security professionals, which the word security in private security, it can also define somebody that protects their employer or clients from cyber attack. Here, Garda ruled. Okay, in Los Altos is paying $20 an hour. Vehicle patrol, you're wondering how much you should pay your employees for vehicle patrol, $20 an hour. That's what they're paying. Security industry specialist, they're paying $20 an hour in Fresno. Palo Alto, $21 an hour. Okay. This is for UCLA Health System. This is not a contract private patrol operator employer, by the way, so we're going to skip that. Here, Berkeley Unified, they're hiring security officer. You want to skip that because that's not a contract position. Here, Garda ruled, again, $20 an hour. You want to know how much you pay receptionist, security receptionist, $22 an hour. Okay, and you could spend a lot of time on this website. So this is the CalJobs website. I recommend when you do market analysis, in addition to using the methods that we describe in this presentation, that you also try the CalJobs website, and it will help you come up with a reasonable number, a reasonable hourly wage. I'm going to say this many times in this presentation. The best way of researching current market trends, researching current billing rates, hourly rates, is by reviewing contracts, agreements that are already signed. So here we're going to review the State of California Department of General Services agreement. I'm going to show you how to get to the Cal eProcure site, and the website is actually an online portal access to bid opportunities and public records. I'll show you how to look for public records when they pertain to contracts, and I'm also going to show you how to look for bid opportunities as well. We're going to review a 2019 agreement between, it's either 5 or 6 private security vendors in the state of California, and it looks like the bid is valid till 2022. Okay, and it's for unarmed security services at state offices, and the agreement is going to show the billing rates. These are the companies that won the bid. One of them is National Security Industries. Another one is Intercon Security Systems. Many of you should know Intercon Systems. They've been around for many years. Cypress Private Security, also popular firm. And actually, Allied bought up Cypress Private Security not too long ago. So on a lot of the contracts, you see for Cypress, Allied will be on them now. Platinum Security Incorporated, I actually know the owner. I'm not sure if he still runs a company, but it's Mark Van Holt. And when I worked in law enforcement in the early 2000s, he was actually my deputy chief. Very, very, very business savvy guy. This guy, when he walks into an office or building, he commands attention from everybody else. The guy is very well spoken, very, very successful man. He knows who I am, and I also know who he is, but we haven't had any type of discussion in the last 20 years, and that's when I left that agency. I haven't seen him since. Another company is Triple Canopy Incorporated. You guys remember? I think it's Blackwater. They changed their name into another name, and right now they're making a lot of bids in the United States, California for security services, and they're winning a lot of the bids as well. And then another company called Val Security Incorporated. I haven't heard of that company, but perhaps you guys have. If you want to get to the Cal eProcure website, you have to type in the correct website address, and here it is: www.caleprocure.cal.gov. As a constant reminder, this can always change. And then you want to go to get public procurement information. There's a lot of keywords in this industry, especially if you want to get information on bids, and the keyword that you have to be looking for is either contract, request for proposal, or procurement. So you see procurement, click on here, and then I'm going to click on search for contracts. Okay, so a contract is something that's already agreed upon. A contract is an agreement. And under description, I'll type in, you could normally put security guard or just security. But if you put in security, you're going to land on a lot of information technology contracts. So I like to just stick with security guard. I put search, and here we are. So if you look at the contract ID numbers, this is all the same contract, but it just split among 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's split among 5 different security companies. It tells you right here what the begin date is and then the expiration date. So it looks like this is for a 3-year contract. Okay, so let's analyze the intercom security. So we're going to click here, and then we're going to have to wait a little bit until the information loads. Okay, here we are. So the type of contract this is called, it's called a master agreement. So that's another keyword to be looking for, master agreement. And here we have Intercom Security Systems. Most of you are familiar with that name. And here is a list of attachment files that we are going to have to view. When you're doing your research on current market trends, when you see a list of attachments, try to go for the largest attachment. And here, if you're just landing on this website of Cal eProcure, most people have no idea what any of these attachment files are. So just hit and miss. You got to just keep downloading as many attachments as possible until you find the actual file that you need. Okay. But I do suspect that it says here executed, which just means that this is probably the complete contract. It says here rates, and this is a Excel file. I bet you anything that they're going to nicely print out the rates of all of the vendors and put them on an Excel spreadsheet so that we can use later on. But let's click on here and see how far we can get. So here we are. We're on standard agreement. they call it STD. That's the acronym for Standard Agreement. And this form is called STD 213. And right here is an agreement number. The thing about agreement numbers is that it's important to note down just in case you need to do other public record requests. Maybe there's some other information that you need to obtain, and the agency requires some more specifics other than you mentioning that there was some type of proposal in the year 2022 or 2023 or whatever year it is. They need more specifics, so it's good to have an agreement number with you on record. This is the first time in this presentation that we're going to review an actual agreement, but we're not going to go line for line of everything. It would be too voluminous if I did so. I think best thing to do is do this on your own time. There's usually a front page of every contract. Remember, the contract is a completed agreement. It is terms and conditions that was agreed upon by both parties. Here, there's exhibits A through F, and it just tells you what exactly each exhibit has. The statement of work is usually the most voluminous portion of an agreement. This tells you right here what exactly has to be done. Okay, I'm going to skip here to where it says rate sheet, because this is what we're primarily concerned about in this presentation when we talk about billing rates and we talk about employee wages. And then going down here, insurance terms and conditions, you have to realize that there's might be some contracts that require you to exceed the $1 million security guard private patrol operator insurance. Okay, and then exhibit F, liquidated damages. This is a page that is often referred to as a penalty page. I mean, we're not supposed to call it a penalty, more so it is generally liked by the courts if you call them liquidated damages. But basically, this will tell you what would happen if your guards don't show up to work on time, or they get cited by the state for some type of violation, or they don't do exactly what they're supposed to be doing in the scope of work. Okay, and right here it says invitation for bid, 72 pages. This was a request for proposal, and it looks like many of the terms or many of the requests in the proposal was met by the vendors here, being able to do everything that they promised to do during their proposal. Okay, so we'll scroll down here, and I'm looking really for the billing rates. Requirements, we'll talk about this in the presentation as we proceed. Very important stuff. Physical requirements, training requirements. I'm not going to pause. I'm just going to name some of the important features of this agreement, and I'm hoping that later on you can actually review this agreement so that you get a better understanding of how contracts work and agreements work with government agencies. Appearance. Okay, they want polished leather. Okay, so here it talks about Security Guard 1, SG1, and then there's going to be SG2. It tells you here what exactly are the duties of SG1 and 2, and all of the duties was a job description that was entered by the Department of General Services, State of California. This is not what the private patrol operator wrote. This is what the state of California needed. Okay, this is everything that they needed, and it looks like that these several security companies that won the bid, they were able to meet the requirements of this bid by what they proposed. Security Guard 2, so this is somebody that's more of a lead, and it's really important to remember these numbers, because when I break down the cost, the billing cost, and the hourly rate, I'm going to be mentioning numbers SG1, SG2. So this would be a lead, and here is all of his job duties or her job duties. And then the supervisor, security guard supervisor, SGS, and then SGM, security guard manager. And it's pretty neat that the Department of General Services is actually paying for a supervisor and a manager. Okay, it says here that they're not to carry any firearms. So this whole contract is an unarmed contract, by the way. Okay, it says you can't sleep on duty, entertain personal visitors. You guys can go through the list. It talks about that there's a minimum wage, but the thing I like is it doesn't talk about a livable wage. It just says minimum wage. Now, I'm coming from a employer perspective. I like a little bit of play in the wage area of a contract. I can pay my employee more or less based on his or her qualifications, but I obviously cannot go under minimum wage. If I have an employee that meets minimum standards, they might go into the minimum wage section, and it just depends on what area we are working and what the job risk entail. The higher the risk, the more hourly rate that the employee should get. Okay, it talks about overtime and replacement of unarmed guards. So if the state of California doesn't like a particular guard, then they have a right to refuse that person. And it says here that you have 2 hours to replace the guard upon being notified. So you might want to have some guards on standby, some on maybe on call. The thing is, if you don't read this contract, you're going to miss some very important things. And here it talks about a dispatch center that you need and communication equipment. Contractor, that's you, shall maintain a 24-hour dispatch center at no additional cost to the user agency. A dispatcher shall be on duty and at the dispatch console at all times. Okay, they're not going to pay for this dispatcher in this 24-hour dispatch center. Okay, that is basically going to man the whole state of California. They're not going to pay for this. Okay, and you have to think about these things when you are giving a proposal to a client or prospective client. Okay, the great thing here is, well, it's actually not too great, but it looks like you're gonna provide a radio. The contractor shall equip each unarmed security guard with a two-way radio and holster. So you're gonna have to, looks like you're gonna have to provide that, the two-way radio and the holster for it at no additional cost for the user agency. Hey, that radio can cost a lot of money, you guys. Okay, it talks about a contractor has to have a computer aid dispatch system. Okay, and it doesn't say who pays for that. It doesn't say that, then you're gonna have to pay for that. Talks about cell phones. Okay, you have to provide some type of communication, and you're gonna see at the end that the bids, they actually seem kind of seem on the higher end when you compare the, well, not the bids, the billing rate, when you compare the billing rate to other contracts that I'm going to show you. It says here that you've got to submit monthly reports based on California Code of Regulations. Okay, that's more work for you to do. And then quarterly, you're going to have to contact the contract project manager is going to have to update the user agency on addresses, number of unarmed guards, the hours shift worked, the billable hours paid, emergency contact, telephone number, and name. Okay. Talks about here about more quarterly usage reports, and that's probably why they're willing to provide a manager to you guys. Okay, you guys can kind of read this on your own. See where it says regions? This is really important because this contract, according to this contract, depending on what contractor is assigned to what area, you could potentially, if you were bidding on this, you'd be responsible for 8 regions. Okay, the California census is divided, I think it's 12 or 13 different regions. but the state of California procurement office regionalizes different counties, and they only do so for a total of 8 total regions here. Okay. Here's the region map. And then a selection process. Okay, you have to, well, actually, this contractor selection process is a process that the user agency, meaning the state of California, was going to use to select you. Okay, local government agency incentive fee. Look at this. So other agencies in the state of California, you're talking about school districts, you're talking about municipalities and other state government branches, city government branches, county government branches. They can actually use this agreement. But if they do decide to use the agreement, let's just say one of the counties out there wants to use this agreement. Remember, this is not for a state-owned facility. This is for a county-owned facility or maybe a city-owned facility. This is something that the contract wasn't going to cover. If one of these agencies adopted this agreement, the contractor, meaning you're going to have to pay a 1% incentive fee. Okay, so it says here, if you got $1 million contract, well, you're going to have to pay $100,000 to the state of California Procurement Office, which is the General Services Department. So you're going to have to write a check out for them, and it doesn't matter whether or not that agency pays you for if they're late on payments, you still have to provide this payment. So you got to have that backing in your account. Don't accept these $1 million projects if you don't have the financial backing. Invoices, rates. Okay, so this is what I've been looking for. This is Intercon Security Services. They were awarded a portion of this contract, and these are all the rates. SG1, SG2, SGS for supervisor, SGM. I'm going to actually show you the Excel spreadsheet and show you how their numbers compare to the other vendors. But what I like about this sheet is this is the billing rate, and this is a rate that I could consider when somebody asks me, hey, how much does it cost for a security guard, unarmed security guard, how much it costs? These are numbers that I can obviously consider, okay? And these are numbers that are on the lower end. Usually to get a government bid, you obviously have to have the experience, and we'll discuss a little bit further what you need, but many times the lowest bidder wins because 25% to 30%, even 40% of the evaluation weight on a contract is based on cost. So this is actually on the lower end, but the reason why it looks so high is because of the dispatch center and then the chance that you might have to pay a 1% incentive fee. And remember the regions that I just discussed? There's region 5, region 6, region 7. Different regions are going to pay different amounts of wages, different billings. I'm sorry, scratch that. It's not wages, it's actually billing rates. They actually don't discuss the actual wages in this contract because they're actually leaving it up to you to pay whatever you want to your unarmed security professionals. They just want you to pay minimum wage. Your security manager, according to this agreement, you can actually pay your security manager minimum wage if you wanted to. Now, if you do that, you're not going to get a very qualified person or somebody that, well, you could put it this way, you can do better. if you pay minimum wage, you might get somebody that's ambitious, but maybe not qualified to be a security manager. The qualified security managers, they're probably going to the employers that pay the best and they have the best benefits and they have the best leadership. Just tells you here who owns the data, and it talks about subcontractors. You also have to see whether or not you're able to subcontract. Most of the time in many contracts you're able to, as long as the client agrees. Because remember, when you're subcontracting, the party that is bargaining for your service, remember, they're anticipating that they're going to get the quality of service that you propose to them, and they may not be too sure on the quality of service of your subcontractors. Talks about the right to terminate, follow the laws, don't hire undocumented workers according to this agreement. And some endorsements that you might need. And here it says for insurance carrier rating, we talked about this in the insurance portion of this course, that there's different ratings that different insurance companies get depending on their financial backing. But here they want an A or better rating in the A and M best key rating guide, and that is a vendor. It's an organization that we discuss in that insurance course. Here's the liability limits. Okay, it's 1 million per occurrence, but look at the annual aggregate limit shouldn't be nothing less than 2 million. Okay, this might be contrary to state policy. They even talk about auto liability. They talk about workers' comp. That's why it's so important to have a workers' comp policy before you entertain any of these government bids. Okay, they talk about professional liability, claims made basis, talk about crime insurance. So you're going to have an additional policy that covers employee dishonesty and theft, computer fraud and crime forgery. Not all general commercial liability insurance policies will cover this, and I believe that the state was willing to pay a higher billing rate because you have to add on this policy to your insurance. All 35 pages. There's some security guard government contracts for the federal government especially, and they'll run up to 500 pages. So I think reviewing 35 pages is not too bad. And once again, I want to remind you that I think it's a good idea for you to review this document on your own time. That way you could understand what goes on an actual agreement and what you can be looking forward to. This is the Excel spreadsheet that I was talking to you about earlier and that I promised to show. So I like how the state of California entered all this information in here conveniently for us so that we could copy it, we could paste it wherever we want. And let's just do a quick rundown. So rank, it's numbers 1 through 3. What this means, if you're up here, is that the state of California will use you. So in Region 1, they're going to use Platinum Security. Region 2, they're going to use National Security Industries as a primary choice. If for some reason they fall through in the contract or they can't provide services, maybe at a particular job site, then they'll resort to the rank 2 guys and then the rank 3. Okay. Here in Region 2, it looks like that this is a larger region and there's 5 different vendors on here. A lack of vendors also means that maybe in Region 1, a company, let's just say perhaps National Security Industries, maybe they can't service Region 1, and that's probably why they're not in the rankings here. Okay, but there's a total of 5 companies that got the bid. It says here Ally Universal. I did mention that Cypress Security won the bid, but actually during this year, 2019, Ally Universal actually bought up Cypress Security. So that's why it says Allied Universal. This is just an update actually. Okay. And then you have all the regions up to 8. Okay. Now, if I work for the city of Ontario, okay, Ontario, California, and I need a security guard service or I need security guard vendor, I can actually reach out to the state of California, the procurement office, and I can use what's on this bid because there was already a competitive bidding process already. I can use who I want from this list. However, let's just say I'm in Ontario and then I don't know what the region is for Ontario. Maybe it just says region 6. So if I want to use intercon security systems, I can't. I have to first use the guy in rank 1 and then go down from there. I have to justify, or I'm going to have to be able to justify to the state why I'm using a rank 3 guy when there's a rank 1 guy available. And I'm going to have to explain why I can't use rank 2. Maybe there's some type of conflict of interest. You probably know the justification for not using some of these companies. And from what I know, all of these companies are reputable companies. Okay, with any company, there's gonna be your guards that are gonna complain with certain supervisors, but in general terms, most guards give at least an average rating for most of these places here. But look how easily the state puts the billing rates right here, okay? For security guard 1 and then security guard 2 and then the supervisor and then the manager and the overtime, okay? I want to repeat, it's so important that these billing rates are here because this is something that you can also use in your contracts or when somebody asks you how much for a guard. Mind you that they're eating up the cost for the dispatch center and the potential for other agencies like maybe the city of Ontario, agencies that were not included in the agreement to use this agreement. Remember that 1% bonus incentive that has to be paid up front. So let's review what we just saw. As a reminder, the EDD Detailed Occupational Guide reported in 2020, guards are paid on average $15.16 an hour. That's $31,541 a year. I am in no way setting an industry standard. That is just what's reported to the EDD. Now, I also want you to remember in this contract, there was a dispatch center that's required, and there's a 1% bonus back to the state of California, and these fees are paid by the contractor, meaning you, as a private patrol operator, if you happen to land an agreement with another agency that's not the state of California, and if that agency uses this exact bidding process, they use this contract, then you as a contractor have to send over $1 million. I just want to be clear on that before you review the rates again. Okay, so Security Guard 1's average per hour rate was based on all 5 PPOs in all 8 regions, and that was $31.45 an hour. Okay, $31.45 an hour. Okay, that is the billable rate, and it ranged between $29 and $36 an hour. Remember, this is not the rate that we are paying them. This is the pay that we're going to get from the state of California. The Security Guard 2, that's the lead officer. His average per hour rate is $32.80 an hour, and it varied between $30.96 all the way up to $37.76. The Security Guard supervisor's average per hour rate was $36.28 an hour, and that ranged between $34.17 and $41.11. The security guard manager's average per hour rate was $39.31 an hour. That ranged between $37.14 all the way up to $42.51. Remember Mr. Livingston? Well, if we use his model of 55% to 65% goes to the guard in the form of wages and benefits, then security guard 1 pay is going to range between $17.30 an hour all the way up to $20.44 an hour. So if we use 65% model, then his wage is going to go to $20.44 an hour. And for security guard 2, it's going to range between $18.04 an hour to $21.32 an hour. This is going to include the wages and benefits. As a reminder, this is the pay that you would pay your guards based on the Livingston model of 55 to 65%. Now, mind you also, let's just look at SG1 real quick, $17.30 to $20.44 an hour. If you're going to pay this person benefits, that's not going to be this person's rate of pay. So remember, you got to factor in the benefits as well. So we can easily bring this person down to $15.30 or somewhere in those figures if we're going to include full benefits. And SGS, that's a security guard supervisor, the rate we're going to pay him is $19.95 all the way up to $23.58, including benefits. And the manager, security guard manager, rate of pay is going to range between $21.62 all the way up to $25.55. Folks, if you're going to pay somebody $25.55 an hour and include benefits on top of that, there's no way this person's going to come close to $25 an hour. This person's rate of pay, her pay could easily be under $20. Moving forward, we are reviewing a County of Stanless, California countywide master agreement with Allied Universal. This is a 2019 agreement. I'm going to just give you the highlights of the agreement rather than just pull that specific agreement out on the screen. It's a 5-year contract and it's valid until the year 2024. Many of these government contracts are actually 5 years. They'll range, sometimes they'll go down to 2 years, but it's typically 2 to 5 years is the average. So an RFP was sent to 159 vendors. Just in case you ask, why am I giving you this specific information? Well, this is the behavior that goes on behind the scenes of the bidding process. So the county sent a package to 159 vendors, and you're going to see how many are responsive. Only 7 of them were responsive. A1 Protective Services responded, American Guard Services responded, Allied Universal responded, and you're going to keep seeing the same companies, the same large companies bidding on these huge projects. Cybersecurity. Okay, cybersecurity keeps popping up, and Allied bought them out very, very recently. Securitas, very, very common name in the security industry. They're bidding on almost all the contracts out there. Hilton Security, and the National Security Industries and Services. So this county has a mandatory minimum wage rate, which is also known as the livable wage rate. And on the columns on the top is going to be the bill rates, and the bottom is the wage rate. That's the rate that you're going to pay your guards. And let's compare. So according to this contract, Security Officer 1 is $19.37 an hour, and during the year 2021, that is what the billing rate is. So as the years progress forward from 2019, these guards are going to get paid significantly more. The pay rate for Security Officer 1 in the year 2021 is going to be $13.46 an hour. Security Officer 2 is $20.10 an hour. And the minimum wage pay for that person is $13.97 an hour. The site supervisor bill rate is $22.87 an hour. The site supervisor, one rate of pay, this is the livable wage, is $15.89 an hour. And mind you, this is with benefits, actually. This is everything. And this county actually didn't say that you have to pay some type of benefit, but they're leaving it up to you. The site supervisor 2 is $24.33 an hour. You have to pay this person $16.91 an hour. Okay, mind you, you can't pay this. So, for example, site supervisor 2 gets $16.91 an hour. You can't pay this person $15 an hour and then the rest will be benefits. No, this person has to get $16.91 an hour. And what you'll do is, if you want to give this person some type of benefits, you're gonna have to deduct it from your billable rate. Okay, and that could definitely be from your profit margin. So from $24.33 an hour, okay, if you want to give this person benefits, then you have to take it away from the billable rate. Site supervisor 3 gets $25.82 an hour billable rate. The rate of pay is $17.94 an hour. The armed officer, they even have an armed account. This is a multi-million-dollar contract, by the way. The armed officer billable rate is $28 an hour, which is nothing. That is such a steal in our industry. And you only have to pay this person $19.50 an hour. They have something called a plainclothes with the concealed weapon permit. The billable rate is $60 an hour. But watch, this is all you have to pay this person. $19.50 an hour. That's it. If this person working in plainclothes with a concealed carry permit. That's it. So it doesn't matter if you are working uniform security armed or you're plainclothes, it's still $19.50 an hour. So what I want you to do is compare these numbers here to the occupational guide in the year 2020, where the guards reported an average rate of pay for them is $14.12 an hour. I know it's 1 year back, and you can more or less just multiply about 1.5% or even 2% if you ever want to have an updated rate of pay that'll give you a ballpark figure on what the current rate of pay is. But look, if they're getting $14.12 an hour on average for that county, if you're actually paying a security officer too below the average. Okay, if you're going to go with that minimum wage. So I highly recommend that you do not pay a security officer too $13.97 an hour when the average pay rate for security guard positions is $14.12 an hour. Okay, if you decide against my advice, then you should definitely have some type of justification for that, and I'm sure you do. I'm going to show you guys a very interesting tool that you might want to use if you are going to assign a guard to a certain area and you want to understand what the county or city ordinances are for a certain area. UC Berkeley Labor Center created a website full of wonderful resources, and here's the link. It's https://laborcenterberkeley.edu. And if you want to look up the page where it has the specific city and county ordinances, below I just put what the website address is. Mind you, over time things might change. The website links might change. It actually did change from my book, The Private Patrol Operator, which was published a few years ago. And while creating this presentation, everything just changed. But if you use this actual address and it lands on something different, just go on Google and type in, or any other search engine, just type in UC Berkeley Labor Center, and you're going to be prompt to that website. Let's begin. So you want to go to the UC Berkeley Labor Center webpage. Here's the address right here, laborcenter.berkeley.edu, and you want to go to where it says Tools and Resources. And just keep in mind, over the years, this address might change, but you want to always seek the UC Berkeley Labor Center. They usually keep the same name. You go to Tools and Resources, and then scroll down to where it says minimum wage and living wage resources. You go to inventory of U.S. city and county minimum wage ordinance, and the UC Berkeley Labor Center, they keep inventory of maybe not all, but many jurisdictions where there is a county or a city ordinance that pertains to minimum wages and even mandatory benefits. Now, we'll go back to here in a minute, but here's a list of many California cities and even other cities in other states. But many of you operate in Los Angeles. I know not everybody, but many do. So if we click on here, this is a plentiful stack of resources on ordinances that pertain to the city of Los Angeles. See, look, it says employer requirements. You have to pay an hourly minimum wage. You got to post an Office of Wage Standards, wage and sick time notice, and they even give you the actual notice. They give you these posters that you can print out on this web page as well, and then it tells you here that you have to keep payroll records for 4 years. Okay, remember there's a state requirement, there's a BSIS requirement, and then there might be a city ordinance or a county ordinance. And it says here, employer must provide employees with the employer's name, address, and telephone number in writing at the time of hire. This is something else that the City of Los Angeles allows. And then right here, retaliation against any employee exercising rights under minimum wage and Office of Wage Standards ordinance is prohibited. Okay, you are going to get sued, or you can get sued if you violate any of this here. And then you can't just say I never knew. Remember, ignorance of the law is not an excuse to break it. So it says here what an employee is. An employee is anyone that performs 2 hours of work within the boundaries of Los Angeles. And you're entitled to earn the California minimum wage. And this is what you're entitled to. Okay, well, these are remedies, okay? Payment of wages unlawfully withheld, payment of sick time benefits. You can get an additional penalty to the employee and to the city whenever there's a violation here. And then if you retaliate, the employee can actually come back to court and sue you for the above remedies. So this is the wage schedule chart. This is mandatory pay. So if you're an employer with 26 or more employees, the City of Los Angeles requires them to have $15 an hour. Remember, San Francisco, the cost of living is more, so $15 an hour might just be a drop in the bucket. They might require a lot more than this. Okay. And if you have fewer than 25 employees, you get a little bit of break, but that was 2020, but they still want the $15 an hour. And then this is the whole paid leave sick chart. So if you have 25 or fewer employees, you have to provide sick leave. And then these are the list of entitlements here. Okay, every 30 hours they work, you got to give them 1 hour of sick leave. Talks about the fines. And remember the posters I was telling you about? All right here. Okay, you could click on this and then print them out. So this is the City of Los Angeles, and there's other cities here. Many of you operate in San Diego. See, minimum wage program. And then it says here effective 2021 in January, minimum wage is now $14 an hour. Okay. Look how convenient UC Berkeley made it for you guys. San Francisco. As of 2020, it's $16.07 an hour. And these are all the things that you need to provide to your employee. Look at healthcare. Okay, there's a healthcare ordinance, healthcare security ordinance. Okay. Look at this, paid parental leave ordinance. Look, if you're a covered employee, you get 8 weeks of paid family leave. Many times these leaves, FMLA leave, Family Medical Leave Act, these leaves are not paid by the federal government. But there might be an ordinance like in San Francisco where they require you to provide pay leave. These are all things that you need to research before you start putting in the bid. Right here, there's a poster that you can post up as well. Here's all the documents that you might need. I downloaded this document. It's called the Inventory of Local Minimum Wage Ordinance from the UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education page. This is a document I mentioned when I was scrolling down right before I got to the City of Los Angeles page. But it goes through other states, other counties, and they have a really extensive list of wage schedules. Look at Alameda County. Okay, these are the wages that you have to pay them. Okay. Let's see what's on the column on the right. Okay, and then here's a link on the right to the website that will explain a little bit more into detail what wage and what benefits you'll need. Look at Emerville, California. See what it says here. Okay, wage before the first increase, $10 an hour, and then it goes through steps. And right here, 20,022. You got to pay them in. Oh no, this is Flagstaff. $15.50 an hour, and then but Emerville, California. It says here, new minimum wage, same rate as large businesses. So that would most likely, and it would probably fall under here, about $15 an hour. But look at all this information that you can get. Hayward, okay. It looks like many cities go through steps and they phase out into a higher wage. And then again, I love how they have the website links. Okay, so this is something that you might want to download right before you bid. And it actually looks like this list is more extensive than the list that they have on their website. And it looks like they update this. This is updated 13th of November of 2020. Okay, I'm just trying to scroll through more to see what we can find here. Santa Rosa, those of you from the area, looks like they're at $15 an hour. And then talks about it, the minimum wages is index. Okay, so it looks like they don't have a 6-step, 7-step, 8-step for many of these cities. Well, this is another state, but when they do, they're probably, so when there's a new update, I'm almost sure that they're gonna write in here that that's a 7-step, 8-step, and 9-step, and then 10-step. As a constant reminder in this presentation, there might be local ordinances, state laws, federal laws, or contractual agreements that require you to pay your employees a livable wage. And that livable wage, all it is, it's a wage higher than the minimum federal and state wage. We're going to discuss a case study on the next slide. And it's an actual agreement between the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Authority, and it's going to involve some collective bargaining units as well. For those of you who don't know what a collective bargaining unit, it's a fancy term for a labor union. And these are the names of the security vendors that were attached to this agreement. Allied Universal got the contract. Cypress Security, remember that Cypress Security is bought out by Allied G4S Security Solutions. They are a brand name in the security industry. Securitas, we almost always see their name. U.S. Security Associates. And here is the billing rates in the agreement. So we have unarmed video surveillance, security console, mobile patrol, arms officer, an ADA observer. Okay, what that probably is, it's American with Disability Act observer. So maybe this person is observing ADA violations, and maybe they are trying to mitigate the risk. A badging clerk. Okay, usually when there's an employee or new employees, they usually get a badge that allows them access into the San Francisco Transportation Authority offices and other buildings. Then you have an armed supervisor. And we have billing rates from 2020 all the way up to 2026. So just take a minute, pause this presentation if you have to just compare these billing rates to what you were thinking about billing your client. I love this contract. It is so much in detail. It's going to help you to determine billing rates and what you should pay your employees, especially if you're in the city of San Francisco. We're going to concentrate our attention to where it says Security Officer 1, start 1/1/2021 and after. We're not going to concentrate on prior years. Prior years, the employee is going to obviously get paid more money. The hourly rate is for Security Officer 1 is $16.70. By Security Officer 1, I think they're referring to the security officer that only has maybe perhaps 1 year of experience on this contract. That's how much they're going to get. And then to your right, you see column B, it's health and welfare benefits. You have to tack on $14.60 to $16.70 an hour. This will come off your billing rate. And see where it says footnotes, column B? Watch what I'm going to highlight right now. Okay, so it says here, single employee contributions begin at 90 days of service. Dependent benefits begin with 3 years. So this is maybe a disadvantage to the employee, but if they're just a single insured employee, their benefits begin at 90 days, just like it says. But if they have kids or they have some dependents, their benefits don't come in until 3 years later. Okay, so they're gonna have to do their time in a way that's gonna want them to stay with your company. But after 3 years, you're gonna have to pay for their dependents, and you're gonna see how much that's gonna be. I just highlighted $18.13 a month. That comes out of your budget. That comes off of the billing rate. And to the left of that, it says $10.46. That is how much you have to dedicate on top of the hourly rate to providing benefits to your employee. Okay. All the way to your left a little bit, it says $721.05 monthly expense. That is for the single employee, single insured. And then it says employee $14.16. Okay, you have to reserve $14.60 on top of your hourly rate for the health and welfare benefits portion of the contract. And then remember where I highlighted in red with the arrow, health and welfare benefits $14.16. Remember, after the 3rd year, if they have dependents of 2 or more, that $14.60 is going to change to $10.46. And that's going to take away some of your profit margin. It's going to be tacked on to your overhead expenses. Vacation, you have to dedicate 32 cents of the hourly rate for vacation. So this person's going to have a vacation bank. Holiday bank, 51 cents. So the total hourly rate is $21.70 an hour. Okay. Now we need to figure out how much are we going to pay this employee, because if we're paying them all these benefits, okay, their hourly rate is not going to be $21.70. It's going to be less than that. So on the slide before, I showed you that $36.87 is the billing rate for our security officer 1, for the year 2022. Okay? And more or less, that $14.16 for the health and welfare benefits from an hourly rate of $16.70, it's basically 25% of the wages. Okay? So next, what we need to do, we need to find out, like, what should we actually pay this employee. So we have $36.87. The pay rate is $21.70. Okay, and because of the health and welfare benefits, vacation, holiday pay, everything else, we're actually stuck with paying this employee only $15.70 an hour. $15.17 an hour. And it's a little bit maybe frustrating, maybe hypocritical for a city that prides itself with the livable wage. $15.17 an hour is not, in my opinion, a livable wage in the city of San Francisco. Now, making sure all of you are still here, making sure you're awake. Did you notice any discrepancies? If you did not, then you were not as awake that you should be, but there was a huge discrepancy. Remember, the billable rate was $36.87 an hour. By the way, if you found the discrepancy, you're doing a great job with this presentation. You're participating. You're noticing the small intricacies that can just ruin your business. So good job if you did notice that discrepancy. So they're paying you $36.87 an hour as a billable rate. And they're telling you that you have to pay your employee $16.70 an hour. Okay, that's the wage that you have to pay them. The $21.70 an hour that just popped up right now, that is the pay that you have to give to your employee that includes the benefits, but they have to have $16.70 an hour. Okay. When we did our calculations, when we deducted the billing rate of $36.87 an hour from the employee paid rate, which include benefits, which was $21.70 an hour, we got $15.70 an hour. That does not meet the terms of the contract. We're not able to pay $16.70 an hour because you were only planning on giving $15.70 an hour. There's a huge discrepancy there. So what ends up happening is, from your billable rate, from your hours, from maybe your profit margin, you have to make up that difference between $16.70 an hour and $15.17 an hour so that you can meet the $16.70 an hour livable wage standard. We also need to consult with the EDD Occupational Guide. I showed you how to do that earlier in the presentation. I pulled up the 2020 version. Remember, just tack on, if you want the current year, just tack on for every single year from 2020, tack on 1.5% to 2% for cost of living increase. It'll give you a more or less ballpark figure to work with. Okay, so they're telling us that we should be paying $17.63 an hour because that is what the median guards in that area are paid. The problem that many guards don't see, especially if they're younger, they don't have any family, they just want to get that higher hourly rate. They're going to compare $16.70 an hour to $17.63 an hour. Okay, what they're not understanding is that they're getting benefits. They're getting paid health benefits from you. They're getting vacation time, sick time, holiday pay. They're getting all that special pay that the contract requires you to provide. So you might have to explain to security guard applicants that that's the reason for the discrepancy. Okay. You might even want to consider paying $17.63 an hour or perhaps more if you want to attract qualified candidates as well. But I'm just showing these numbers here so that you have something to work with. So these are my thoughts about contacting a competitor and asking about billing rates. It's unusual for one to contact a competitor. So if you say, hey, I'm ABC Security Company, you contact 123 Security Company, you ask about their billing rates. It's a highly unusual conversation because this person is competing against you. So companies are less inclined to provide quotes. They're less inclined to provide the hourly rate for their guards. If you just call and pretend to be a client and try to get rates, if I as a private patrol operator have to spend 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, maybe an hour or so calculating a bid, a phantom bid for you, if I find out who you are, your name and the name of your company is going to be discredited in professional circles in our industry. So it's something that you want to avoid. Now, if your competitor has a website where you can just put in some numbers, put in hours, the type of service, and then you get an automatic quote, that's okay. That's something that isn't, it's not something that's unusual. It's something that's more acceptable than if you just call and pretend to be a client. And that's just my personal opinion on that. At this point in time, we are pretty much done talking about the hourly rate. We'll talk a little bit about it perhaps further than presentation. But the bulk of the hourly rate discussion is finished. As for billing rate, we did go into deep depths into it, but we are not totally finished speaking about billing rate because other than hourly rates, the rate that you pay your private security officers, you have to think about overhead cost because the more overhead costs you have, the higher your billing rate is supposed to be if you want to remain in business. So here's some examples of overhead cost that's going to affect your billing rate. Rent. Is your office in San Francisco? Is it in Los Angeles? Is it in San Diego? Is it in San Jose? If it's in any of those larger cities, you're going to expect to pay more for rent as compared to if you have an office in a small desert town. Patrol vehicles. Are you patrolling some type of development where there's not roadways? You got to go off road in order to protect maybe a construction project? Well, in that case, if there's no roads, you might need an off-road vehicle. You might need an SUV, a 4x4. You might need a bicycle to reach some of your contracts. Maybe a golf cart, maybe an ATV, you name it. What about insurance premiums? And I'm not talking about just a regular general commercial liability. There's also workers' compensation insurance, business auto insurance. Insurance and insurance premiums and the hourly rate that you must pay your private security officers and any type of benefits and payroll taxes that go along with it, this is all going to cover a little bit more than half of your billing rate. That's why it's so important to discuss this. Utilities. There's water, power. Well, how about internet? These are all things that you must consider in a billing rate. Office equipment. You might have your own personal computer, but do not use that for business purposes. You don't want to commingle your business into your personal life and vice versa. Have a business computer, have a private computer. This also makes things easier if you need some type of audit done. Or what if you need one of your employees or a trusted person to do some work on your business computer? You don't want to have your personal projects on there. How about advertising or marketing fees? Maintenance of patrol vehicles. These patrol vehicles need oil changes. If you buy secondhand, perhaps police vehicles, there's going to be a little bit more maintenance required just because police officers, law enforcement officers tend to drive their vehicles a little bit differently than their private vehicles. Gas for patrol vehicles. Okay, you got a patrol account, you're going to have to pay for gas. You get a vehicle that requires more gas, well, you're going to have to put that expense into your billing rate. Uniforms and equipment. You're going to be required to provide uniforms and equipment to your private security staff upon their hiring. This is an expense that you need to consider. Training for officers. Are you going to pay for the training, or are they going to have all of their training, all of their 40 hours of training, including maybe the annual refresher course, before they are put onto a post? That's something you have to consider. Now, sometimes when the employer provides this level of training or this amount of training, this can also be a benefit, and it can also attract qualified professionals. Overtime wages. If there's an account that has a good likelihood of overtime, well, you're going to have to also consider that in your bid. Contracts that might require some overtime are contracts that require extensive contact with the public, because that last 5 minutes, 10 minutes might result in the police having to be called, or some type of other private security measure that is designed to protect the client might need to be deployed. What about wages paid to others when an officer is on vacation or calls in sick? Is the client going to pay for this? What if you have a 20-hour-a-week private security post and you provide vacation, sick time, and this person takes that sick time, vacation, and then isn't present for that post? Well, you're going to need a replacement. So you're going to have to pay 2 employees. What if you have to pay the second person overtime? What if they complete their 40 hours of work? You put them on the shift, it's overtime. Are you prepared to pay this? Well, hopefully you will, because you include this potential for minor loss in your billing rate. What about the COVID-19 Leave Act? Coronavirus? If you have a workplace where there's maybe 3 guards at once, and 1 guard contracts coronavirus, well, you're going to have everybody out on that post. You're going to have to get somebody from another post or a roving patrol to cover that, and then where that person gets 2 more sick. And it just goes on and on and on. There's workforces that have been wiped out temporarily, maybe 10 days, 14 days, because of the coronavirus. You got to be prepared for this. And if your employee, well, if you can prove that your employee did not contract coronavirus at the work site, then you may not have to pay for this person being out of work. But that's on you. That's the burden, and that's very difficult to do. Okay? Now, if the guard contracted coronavirus on duty, well, you're going to have to pay for the leave. Okay? And remember, there's a presumption right now at this moment in the year 2020. The other years, there could be some different formal law, but at least 2020 going into 2021, there's a presumption that if the employee is an essential worker and they contract coronavirus within a certain number of days, usually 14 days, they're going to probably move it down to 10 days after leaving the work site, that it's presumed that they got this disease on duty, and you're responsible for providing leave and even medical attention. FMLA. Okay, what if you meet the threshold for having a certain number of employees, and you have an employee that's maybe pregnant, about to deliver, or even another employee, a male employee that, or female, where they have a family member that requires their attention, perhaps they're elderly or they're dependent adult? Well, under the FMLA Act, you're going to have to give them that time off. Now, obviously, there's a threshold that will be covered, threshold of a number of employees that will be covered, that will be discussed into more detail further in this course. There's a California Family Rights Act, and in California, the legislator tends to give the employees more rights. So if you thought the FMLA Act, which is federal law, was restrictive and anti-employer, just wait until you see what the California Family Rights Act requires. We're finished discussing most of the line items that are covered in an overhead cost estimate. Now we're going to talk about legislation that can affect your billing rate. So when you form a quote, just make sure that there's no pending federal or state legislation or pending ordinances that might impact your overhead cost and potentially raise them beyond expected levels. That's why it's so important, especially in the state of California, that whenever the Bureau of Security Investigative Services has a meeting and a month later or a couple weeks later they publish the minutes, they publish the video, that you watch the whole video. Yes, it might be 2 hours and 31 minutes long, 4 hours long, but the items that they discuss can have so much of an impact on you as a private patrol operator. I'll give you a perfect example. There was a time when you did not have to have commercial liability insurance, especially those of you that work the unarmed post or that had unarmed contracts. And then they wrote into law that you needed it. And before, the only requirement was if you had an armed post or armed contract, you'd have to have that level of insurance. If nobody reviewed the minutes, reviewed the agenda, didn't subscribe to the Bureau of Investigative Services email subscription services, they weren't on YouTube listening to new legislation, maybe they didn't monitor their mail, you wouldn't even known about this. And as a result, your business might be underwater because you weren't looking into pending federal or state legislation. Basics of contract law. If it was reasonably foreseeable, that's the buzzword, reasonably foreseeable, in the contract that there was pending legislation, you may need to eat the new cost. Okay? So important to keep in mind. You're going to be the one that's going to bear the burden of the cost. If it was reasonably foreseeable that these costs would be present. Another thing to think about is wages. Okay? If there is some legislation that says you need to pay your employees $30 an hour, and I'm just forecasting on the high end, and you're currently paying them $16 an hour, well, you're going to have to make up that difference, okay? You're going to have to make that difference so that you can abide by state law, okay? If there was no reasonably foreseeable way amongst both parties, you might be able to get out of that, but if it's reasonably foreseeable on your part, you might need to bear that cost. Example, COVID-19 pandemic and then PPE, okay? That personal protective equipment, gloves, mask. In the beginning of the pandemic, a KN95, not to be mixed up with an N95 mask, that mask was selling an easy $10 to $15, sometimes more than that. Now the N95, which is more of the medical standard, I seen that mask going for about $50 a mask. If you have 10 employees, 500 employees, are you ready to bear that cost? What if your employees need latex gloves? Well, you're going to have to bear the cost of that if there's a pandemic. What if you have some employees that are allergic to latex? Well, you're going to have to accommodate those employees and provide the proper PPE. What about pending amendments to the Affordable Care Act, okay, also known as Obamacare? What if they make it mandatory that you have to pay for your employees' premium? It doesn't matter how many employees you have. What if it's mandatory? What is mandatory that you pay 100%? Okay, this is stuff that you need to reasonably foresee. Watch the news and always look out for legal updates. So important. And then what about tax increases to businesses and its owners? So what if you're in a city that's about to go bankrupt and they start raising business taxes? If you did not attend any of the city council meetings or county council meetings or reviewed the minutes afterwards, there could be pending legislation that could drastically affect your business. What if the county or city plans on taxing maybe 20%, 40% of your gross receipts, revenue? What do they do that? Now, a lot of this that I'm saying, it's speculative generally, but it does happen more often than not. At this point in time, we are going to discuss actually calculating a billing rate. We're going to get more into detail into the numbers. So one of the methods that I recommend that will give you a rough estimate of a billing rate. And remember, billing rate is the rate or the hourly billing rate that you would present to the prospective client. And every time you give a billing rate, you're going to have to justify each line item. So using the Caveman method, and by the way, I call it a Caveman method because we're not using any computer software. There's no billing software. It's a technique that you can actually use by just grabbing a napkin and a pen and writing down these numbers. So let's just say your operating expenses for the first year of being in business is $28,000. I think $28,000 is a reasonable number. Depending on where your business is located, it might be less. And then you also have to remember that year number 2 and 3 and 4, your operating expenses may not be $28,000. $28,000 is for a startup company. So the more time you have on the ground operating, the less hopefully your organization will be if you're managing it properly. You're going to get $20,000 and then you're going to divide it by 2,080 hours. Here we are making an assumption that this is a full-time contract. Full-time meaning 40 hours a week. For the guards, there will be 26 pay periods, and each pay period will have 80 hours. So you'll divide by 2,080 hours. Again, we are assuming that this is a full-time contract for one guard. The rate we have just to cover operating expenses is $13.46. And you're going to get this number of $13.46, and you're going to add it to the hourly wage rate, whatever you intend to pay your private security officers. For all intents and purposes, we'll just use $16 an hour. And what's this $2.24 that just popped up? Well, don't forget the payroll taxes. So what I did here is I got $16. We have to consider that the Social Security tax right now is 6.2%. The Medicare tax is 1.45%. And for the EDD, the tax rate, if you're in your third year of business, is 6.2%. Now, year 1 and 2, it's going to be about 3.5%, 3.4%. However, that can change. But on year 3, your yearly cap, meaning you won't have to pay more than this amount to the EDD, will be $7,000. And the grand total is 14%. So whatever hourly rate you intend on paying your employee, just multiply that by 14% for the payroll taxes, and you will have an approximate number. So what we now have is $31.70. This is the minimum billing amount to the client if you want all of your overhead cost paid for, you want your guards' wages paid for, and this also includes the payroll taxes. Have you noticed that there's nothing for profit? So if you bill your client $31.70, they pay that to you, you're not going to have any money in your own pocket to live, to survive. So what you're going to end up doing is you're going to need to account for profit. So I would put somewhere an amount that's reasonable to you. If $2 an hour on the billing rate is reasonable, then do that. I'm not setting industry standard. I'm just putting any number here. Another thing I want to emphasize is when you calculate billing rates, always do so in terms of hours. So I would always bill on the hour, most of the time though. Saying always is an absolute term that does not allow any wiggle room, but most of the time when you calculate billing rate, it should be by the hour. So if I want to profit and make $2 an hour just for myself, just for my organization, the billing rate is going to be $33.70 an hour. I want you to compare this number here to the billing rates earlier in the presentation and just ask yourself, is this something that you can compete with? Let me tell you this, the large security organizations have a lot of their overhead costs paid for in the hourly billing rates. They might have 10,000 guards, 20,000 guards, 100,000 guards worldwide, and every hour that's put out there by one of these guards that's doing a good job, doing hard work, is just eliminating a lot of the overhead cost. You, on the other hand, you might have one officer, two, maybe 10. You cannot offer a rate that is almost the same as the super extremely large private security companies. You're going to have to demonstrate some other value to your client. Now you could offer what they offer, but I'll tell you this, you're not going to have any profit, if anything, maybe a few cents. $33.70 is the number. So what's my opinion on security guard billing rate calculators? The Caveman method is just a method that you can use on the go. Now, if you want a more accurate billing rate, I do recommend a security guard billing rate calculator. However, you're going to have to pay for this service or pay for the software, which is just going to add to your overhead cost. Now, the main difference between the Caveman method and having a billing calculator is that there are more line items to enter into a billing rate calculator than there is using the Caveman method. Well, actually, you can do this on the Caveman method, include different line items, but you're just going to have to do it by hand. And there's always room for error when you do something by hand. A computer's calculation is a lot more accurate. Okay? And you can also enter formulas. You could enter percentages in there. You find out what your payroll tax rate is, Medicare tax rate, and you just plug in those numbers. You plug in the hourly rate for your guards, and there's a lot of automation that comes with security guard billing rate calculators. You can also add line items such as uniforms. You can add even holsters, radios. There's so many other options with a security guard billing rate calculator. So my opinion is once the revenue starts coming in, you have the contracts, I think it's a great idea to use a billing rate calculator. And also, billing rate calculators offer the opportunity of automatic invoicing to your clients. Just something to consider. You can also hire an accountant to calculate the proper billing rate. It just depends on your preference. Now, mind you, whether it's a Caveman method of calculation or a billing rate calculator, there's a potential for the billing rate to seem as if it is exaggerated. So, for example, if you do get a contract, but it's only 10 hours a month, full time, for a whole year, well, guess what? Your billing rate is not going to be $33.70. It can easily be in the $100 to $200 an hour, depending on the overhead costs, and you are not going to be competitive at $200 an hour for similar service when you compare that to other security vendors in your area. The best time to get a billing rate calculator or to understand really the value of using the Caveman method is you have to expect and reasonably expect for you to land this contract that is full-time, 40 hours a week for the whole year. Can you just imagine that if you're only billing for profit $2 for every hour, you're only getting $4,160 for the whole year. You probably need a lot more security officers than just one. $4,160 of profit just for you for having one full-time guard is not enough for the average American. Okay, third consideration. When you calculate a bid or quote, you're going to also have to consider the knowledge, skills, and abilities a client seeks. Let's talk about that a little bit more. What you're going to have to do is figure out what knowledge, skills, and abilities the client is seeking. So, for example, what if the client wants a gender that is not on your payroll? What if you have all males? And what if you pick up a contract, maybe executive protection, you're protecting perhaps a female celebrity, and that female celebrity only wants female executive protection agents. Okay, you're going to have to accommodate that request. What if it's someone of a certain age? What if the client asks you, hey, I want somebody over 50 years of age. I want somebody mature, maybe over 40. I don't want no 18-year-old kid to be providing services. Okay, this is something that you're going to have to consider. Are you going to have to seek out for this particular person? What if they want somebody with advanced open hand combat skills? What if it's a unarmed position and these skills are required? Okay, you're going to have to put out a request for employment, a job offer for somebody that has these skills. And minimum wage might not just cut it. You might have to go a few dollars over the minimum wage, $10 over the minimum wage, but you might just have to have somebody that's going to have to meet that demand. What do they want? A drug detection dog. This is going to be costly. Not only do you need the dog, you're going to need the handler, of course, and some type of security car to transport this dog in. And then also the insurance. Your insurance is going to go up. Your insurance goes up. I hope that you are calculating that into your bid. Some might want off-duty law enforcement. Most of the time, off-duty law enforcement, they're not going to accept your positions for minimum wage. They want, most of the time, a pay that's equal to what they're getting right now, and even perhaps maybe an overtime rate. if they're getting $30 an hour, they might want $45 an hour because that's their regular overtime rate. You're not going to get an off-duty officer that's going to work for minimum wage in most circumstances, unless minimum wage is what the law enforcement agency is paying them. Okay, what if you have guards, security officers, that have a physical disability? You know that they do the job great, but let's just say your client has property that's located in an area where you're going to have to just only walk upstairs. Maybe there's no car access or vehicle access. Okay, you're not going to want to get rid of your employee just because of their disability, because that could be a violation of the American Disabilities Act, and it's just something wrong to do as an employer. So what do? Do you keep this employee on the balance sheets, on the payroll, while you find somebody that is able to walk these stairs? That's something that you're going to have to answer. Some clients want somebody that speaks a particular language. Very popular. There's Arabic, there's Chinese, there's different versions of Chinese, there's different dialects. There might be French, maybe Japanese, Russian, Korean, you name it. Your client might want somebody with that specific skill set. And if you're just asking minimum wage, well, your prospective employee base out there might want a little bit more than minimum wage, and you're going to have to accommodate that in the bid. And also, reports that are submitted to the client, they might need to be translated depending on the contract and the nature of work, the scope of work, of course. Are you going to pay somebody to translate these documents? Just things to think about, right? Part 2, Proposal to Contract. Let's talk about what exactly a proposal is. In this part of the presentation, we're going to discuss the proposal, and then we're going to end at the actual contract. So, a proposal is a willingness by either party to enter into an agreement. And when I say agreement, I also mean contract, that is bound by certain or definite terms. Each proposal must create a power of acceptance. That is, should the client agree to the proposal, he or she will accept the terms and conditions. A way of remembering something during stress is by remembering an acronym. This acronym that we're going to discuss in this presentation is called Q-TIPS. And Q-TIPS is going to help us remember what the elements are to making a proposal. You also have to keep in mind that if you have Q-TIPS, you have something could eventually turn into an agreement if both parties agree. So let's talk about every single letter that is in Q-TIPS. The Q refers to quantity. How many? How many security guards are there going to be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the time refers to, well, how long? 80 hours, 40 hours. Identity refers to the identity of the parties. Is this a contract between ABC Security Company and 123 Client Services? If so, the parties have to be identified in the contract. Price. We talked about time, we talked about quantity. What about price? How much are you charging for your billing rate? Is it $35 an hour, $20 an hour, $50 an hour? The price has to be included in Q-TIPS. And then the subject. What exactly is the subject matter? Is this patrol services? Is this CCTV monitoring service? Is this somebody answering phones? What exactly is the subject matter? If you have Q-TIPS in proposal, you have a good proposal. And in a contract, if you have Q-TIPS or a possible contract, something that you think is a contract, if you have Q-tips in that contract, then there's a good chance that you have a legally binding agreement. I know a lot of this information sounds overwhelming. This is taught in law schools all over the United States and other countries. Not every school, but many do. So we're going to actually pull up an actual contract, and we are going to break down the contract and see if Q-tips applies to that contract. So let's just say that you made the proposal already. You included all the elements of Q-tips. You remember that acronym very well. When you're preparing this actual contract, and remember, your client could prepare it or you. I like to prepare my own contracts because it gives me a little bit more weight on the contract, and the terms are going to most likely be a little bit more favorable to me. Whoever writes a contract, the terms are going to be more favorable to them a little bit more, sometimes a lot more. But what I'm doing is looking over the contract, and I'm looking to see if there's something called consideration. Now, consideration is something of value given by both parties to an agreement. And consideration can be a promise to do something or something with value. And in most circumstances, the value is money or labor. I promise to pay you $60 an hour to patrol my apartment complex. And the other party will say, well, I promise to pay you if you do that. And that's consideration. Another important component of a legally enforceable contract is the element of acceptance. A good way of looking at acceptance is by asking yourself, are the terms and conditions of the agreement a mirror of what the other party desires? In other words, an acceptance occurs when the other party is willing to mirror their respective terms of the offer. If the party accepts some of the terms, but not all, that is called a rejection and a counteroffer. Then the party is going to have to renegotiate. I want you to think Q-tips. Did the party accept the quantity, the time, the identity, the price, and the subject matter? When I mean the party, I mean the other party to the contract, by the way. The element of mutuality must be in every agreement. Mutuality is defined when the contracting parties have a meeting of the minds of the agreement. Both parties understand the terms and conditions of the contract. I think for this contract, I might maybe get a yacht. Will you please sell me that yacht? I was thinking about the fishing boat, but you know what? I'll just give you the yacht. Now you have a meeting of the minds. Both parties understand the terms and conditions of the contract. And a meeting of the minds can be evidenced by both parties' signature under the terms and conditions. Both parties sign, that's evidence that they accepted all the terms of the agreement. What I like to do on a contract, if it's multiple pages, I will actually have the other party initial each page. You can have them sign each page, that's fine, but I usually go by initials. If there's a very important item, you might want to consider having them initial that too. However, if you do that, the issue is that you're saying that this line item is important, that you have to initial, but the other ones are not. So it's a better idea to just have them initial at the end of each page. You have 5 pages, there should be 4 initials, and then the last page can be the full signature. What you're looking at right now is a standard agreement. This is an actual learning exercise that you and I are going to work on together. On your right, you have the standard agreement. You have terms and conditions. I want you to read it from top to bottom. On the left, you have all the elements of Q-tips. Remember, these are the elements that need to be present when you propose an offer to somebody. Remember also that a proposal can turn into agreement when you have consideration and you have mutuality. You have those two things, then you have an agreement when you also don't forget about the meeting of the minds. Remember that? Meeting of the minds. Both parties sign for the agreement. Take about 3 to 4 minutes and just analyze this agreement. Ask yourself first, are all the elements of a proposal, are they in this agreement? If they are all of the other elements of what is needed for a contract present in this agreement? So go ahead and pause this video and start about now. Okay, I'm going to assume that you finished analyzing this agreement, and let's go through each item. So quantity, is there an element of quantity in this standard agreement? If you think that there is, well, let's talk about that. Did you notice where it says officers? This can be 2 officers, or it could be 100 officers, or it could be 1,000 officers. This agreement needs to be more specific. As for time, it tells us commencing April 5th, 2022, all the way up to April 5th, 2023, that there will be uniformed security officers performing work at these apartments, right? It gives us the beginning days, which is Wednesdays at 9 o'clock a.m. and Mondays at 5 o'clock a.m. I'm satisfied in this standard agreement that the time element is met. As for quantity, that is lacking in this standard agreement. Identity of the parties. All we know that is that Sean Sundell, DBA, doing business as Sean Sundell Security Services, is a sole proprietor, and he's the only person in this agreement. There's mention, if you look at number 1 and number 2, it does refer to a client, but who's this client? We have no idea who this client is. And unless we can identify the client, we do not have an agreement. Another issue is this. Is the client Weston Apartments? Is it the management company for Weston Apartments? I don't know. And I don't expect you to know either. This standard agreement was not correctly written. Price. Okay, $40 per security officer. We're on line 2. Is this $40 per minute, or is this $40 per hour? We don't know. Okay, it just says $40 per security officer for a total of 80 billable hours per week. 80 hours. Now, one can assume that maybe it's $40 an hour because it says 80 billable hours per week, but I prefer if you would put $40 per hour. It just sounds a lot more clear. Okay, the next item is subject matter. Well, what's the subject matter here? It just says on number 3 that they're going to perform work. Well, what kind of work are they going to perform? Is this security work? And if this is security work, well, what is this? Is this a foot patrol, bike patrol, vehicle patrol? Because the vehicle patrol is going to be a lot more expensive than the foot patrol. Bicycle patrol is going to be a little bit more expensive than the foot patrol as well. There's a little bit more workers' comp exposure to that and other liability. So for all intents and purposes, this standard agreement did not have all the elements of a proposal that's needed. And because it does not have all the elements of a proposal, there is no legitimate, legally binding agreement. Was there a meeting of the minds? Well, if both parties signed, but both parties don't even know what exactly they're agreeing to. Is there consideration? Yes, there's $40. We don't know if it's per hour. Maybe it's per hour. Okay, that would be the consideration. What you're looking at right now is another standard agreement. It's probably written a lot better than the other one, if you cannot suspect that already. And this is a learning exercise that you and I are going to work on together. What I want you to do here is use the Q-tips method that you learned not too long ago. Apply that to the standard agreement. Are all the elements of Q-tips in this agreement? Remember, Q-tips is the negotiation phase. It's the proposal. And many times, Q-tips, the elements of Q-tips are in the standard agreement. I also want you to see if the other factors of a legally enforceable contract are in here. I'm going to give you a little hint. Remember, one of them is accepting terms of the agreement. Now, that's kind of hard to hash out right now because we didn't do a video where we're negotiating with an actual person in lifetime. So that's kind of hard. But most of the time when you have already a standard agreement written, everything's in writing, there was probably an acceptance of the terms. Both parties are willing to accept all the terms. Okay, if not, then you have a counteroffer and you have different elements of negotiation. So here we're going to assume that both parties are willing to accept the terms and the preliminary negotiations is finished. Now remember, there's two other major elements. There's mutuality element and the consideration element. So what I want you to do right now is pause this video, take about 3 to 5 minutes, and ask yourself if the elements of Q-tips are in this standard agreement. Is the acceptance of terms here? Mutuality is here? Is there consideration? So go ahead and pause it right now. Okay, I'm going to assume that you took a couple minutes to read the agreement. First thing we're going to ask ourselves is a mutuality element here? Were both parties willing to accept the terms? And I know that there's no signatures here. Without signature, no, they're not willing to accept all the terms. But let's just say both parties signed. They're showing in good faith that they're willing to accept all the terms of the agreement. If they were not, then they shouldn't have signed it, right? Now, consideration. Remember, that is the value for the service or even a promise to perform something for something. Here we have payment for the services. Okay, $40 an hour. That's the consideration element. Now let's return back to Q-tips. Quantity. Is there a quantity here? Let's take a look. 2 unarmed uniformed security officers. Okay, that's great. Remember in the other agreement, we just mentioned security officers, plural. Well, we're specific, which is good. Time. Let's go to number 3. Beginning April 5th, 2022, and ending April 5th, 2003. This is a 1-year contract. And then the work week is Wednesday, 9 a.m. and ends at Monday at 5 a.m. I am satisfied that the time element in Q-tips is met. Price. $40 an hour. Remember the other agreement? It just says $40. Okay, $40 an hour is a price. And then it's an 80-hour billable work week, by the way. Identity. Who are the parties here? I hope that you saw that the client now is ABC Corporation. So it's Sean Sundell Security Services, Sean Sundell DBA, Sean Sundell Security Services, by the way. I'm telling you that I'm a sole proprietor, and I'm telling you that ABC Corporation is incorporated in California. Subject. Okay, we're going a little bit farther here than the other agreement because we're performing basic security services, but we're elaborating and discussing that we are observing and reporting crime to the police We're doing foot patrols and responding to calls for service. And then we're even saying we're at. So it's at the Westin Apartments. There's a lot more specifics here. You can put the terms in broad terms. Doesn't have to be exact terms. And you should be fine. Obviously, the better description you have of something, sometimes it is the better thing to do. So here you have it. You have a standard agreement. This is something that would be legally enforceable. Now you have a legally enforceable contract. And I hope you feel so much more confident in writing contracts because you've seen what a bad contract looks like and then you've seen what a legally enforceable contract looks like. You know all the elements, and I hope you feel so much more confident. Another thing is this. You saw there's an item number 4. Well, that refers to an interest fee, late payment fees. Let's just say your client pays you late. I think you should tack on some type of terms and condition where that the client has to pay you interest or some type of fee for any late payment. That's going to encourage them to pay you on time. Just don't call it a penalty. The courts tend to not like penalties, and they do not like to enforce penalties. But for breach of contracts, they do like to enforce that. Which comes to mind, the next topic of today is breach of contract. I'll give you an example, and in this example, I want you to apply all the key points to it. So in this example, you agree to have an officer patrol the client's property between 5 o'clock p.m. and 10 o'clock p.m., but the officer does not show up. In fact, no one shows. Does that sound familiar? Well, with many organizations, it does. Consider whether this is a breach of contract or not. Let's talk about this. In most cases, neither you nor the client can modify the agreement unilaterally. So if the guard does not show up, you are modifying the agreement in a unilateral manner. And any behavior not consistent with the terms of the agreement can be viewed as an unauthorized modification. What I've seen many guard companies do on their contracts is write a term and condition. Let's just say if their guard didn't show up at a certain time. So they might write in there that they might pay the client a penalty, a fee of maybe double the wages, or they might get reimbursed. But that's usually what guard companies will do so that their contract is not viewed as an unauthorized modification and a breach of contract. Also, modifications can be viewed as a breach of contract if the breach is material. That is, the breaching party failed to perform a major part of the contract. In our scenario, if the guard doesn't show up to work, that's a major breach of contract in my opinion, because the whole reason for the contract was that they wanted a guard at a certain time of the day to protect their property and their people. You don't show up, in my opinion, that's a major breach of contract. Now, obviously, my opinion doesn't count. It just depends on what the courts decide or what an arbitrator decides, but let's hope that we don't get to the point. Can't stress this enough. You should have a term and condition that describes what you have to do if a guard doesn't show up. I've seen other guard companies write in there that they will have a guard show up within an hour or 2 hours. Okay, if that information, that terms and conditions in the agreement, it might protect you a lot better than if you didn't even have that term and the guard didn't show up. Also, the breach must be substantial and have prevented the agreement from being completed. Going back to our scenario, I still think that it's a breach of contract. Applying all of these elements of breach of contract to almost any situation it will give you an understanding of whether or not there was in fact a breach of contract. Subcontracts. Subcontracts are very common in the private security industry. Some contracts will allow subcontracting and others won't. It is defined as a reassignment of previously agreed upon work to another entity or business. You also have to make sure that the contract does not prevent subcontracting, and make sure that there are no laws that prevent you from subcontracting. There's something in the Business Profession Code called fee splitting. 7582.26 subsection B covers that. And it says verbatim, no licensee shall permit an employee or agent in his or her own name to advertise, engage clients, in any manner whatsoever, conduct business for which a license is required under this chapter. All businesses of the license shall be conducted in the name of and under the control of the licensee. So here is a map of the California census in the year 2020. There are 10 different regions. Let's just say that you have a friend in region number 4, which is the northern San Joaquin Valley. That actually covers Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, Madera, Mariposa, Merced, Mono, San Joaquin, Stanless, Tuolumne, and let's just say your friend wants to do the other contract over in Los Angeles County. To avoid any accusation of fee splitting, my suggestion is the PPO who cannot service a client or that client either not accept the assignment or refer the client to another PPO. And also, if you're approached by a client who needs service in an area where you cannot perform such service, I think that you should clearly inform the client that your company cannot service that area and you cannot contract with the client, but that you could have another PPO in mind service that area. And I'm assuming that in doing so, the PPO who you referred this client to will now owe you a favor for the new business. This business of private patrol operators, private security, involves so much networking. You scratch my back and I scratch yours. You hook me up with business, I'll remember your name and I'll do the same thing. I think that's the safest way on how to avoid an accusation of fee splitting, which is a direct violation of the Business Professions Code. Welcome to part 3, post orders. If you need to take a break, go ahead and do so. It's always a great idea before you learn something new on a different portion of this course to definitely take a break. Post order elements. This section is so brief that we're going to fly by this, but let's discuss the important elements. A post order comes after the agreement, after the contract has been made. Remember, the post order is going to reflect the terms and conditions of the agreement, right? It's going to reflect the intentions of the agreement and expectations of the client as well. And it has to be specific to each job site. You can't just have generic post orders. Every client site is special. It's special to that client, and your post orders should reflect your client's wants and wishes on that job site. If you have post orders for an apartment complex, those post orders are going to be a lot different than post orders to a strip mall post. Make sure that your post orders are always approved by the client, and have the post orders in an area that's accessible by the officer. I see that in current times that post orders might be accessible maybe through an iPad or some tablet or other computer device. It's in an electronic form. In my days when I started, we had post orders in a binder. My recommendation is to always have a hard copy and electronic copy on site, just in case the computer goes down. And for some reason, computers go down when you don't want them to. You should include the name, address, and phone number of the post. You should include the PPO license number, the phone number, emergency phone number, and address on file with BSIS. You're going to need this information just in case a compliance analysis or investigator from BSIS appears at the work site. You want your guards to have all this information. They also need to know the name of the qualified manager, and the owners of the company is also important, but the most important name that your guards need to remember is the name of the qualified manager. Also the branch manager as well. The days and hours of operation need to be on the post orders. Emergency contact numbers for the client and their agents. There might be a break-in at one of the stores, and in the middle of the night, the police are going to show up, ask your security staff for a number to a responsible party, and if these numbers, this information is not on the post orders, well, you're left with the unsecured business throughout the night. Okay, this is an issue with a lot of private patrol operators. They're hesitant to ask the personal phone numbers and home addresses of their clients. They just include the business address, and that is not the right thing to do. You also should put in there the type of post it is and a short description of the property's boundaries. If you don't outline boundaries, when a guard sees something exciting across the street, they might just have this excuse and tell you, well, the post orders didn't say what the boundary was, and another guard a year or two ago told me that the boundaries go across the street. Let's reduce that type of silliness by including the boundaries in the post order. Really important is a description of the officer's job duties. Okay, you get a new officer or an officer that just fills in that hasn't been trained as much as they should. Well, they need to know what their job duties are. What does the post ask of them? Your post orders need to contain protocol and handling events that are most likely to occur on the property. You might have a property that has a lot of fights, maybe a lot of kids ditch school and they go into your property. Maybe there's traffic collisions, just something that most likely is going to occur should be on the post order protocol. You should have protocols and handling events that are less likely to occur on the property. So these are things such as active shooters, bomb threats, toxic spills, things that could happen but that are less likely should also be on there. And you could put the protocol in a form of an emergency action plan. You can do that as well. Emergency action plans are discussed further in this presentation. Not in this specific educational block, but it'll be in this course. Incident or report forms should go in the post orders. And this is just in case the internet breaks down. Sometimes the internet doesn't go down, but sometimes you have private security officers who don't have the confidence they need to write a report or to do an incident form. So they might not do what it takes to fill this form out. They might come up with these excuses that the computer doesn't work, internet doesn't work. Well, let's eliminate those excuses and always have an incident or report form available in print version. Put in there copies of the authority to act in client's behalf. This is kind of like a power of attorney form. You're telling law enforcement or fire who are on the property that you have the authority from the client to make limited legal decisions on their behalf. And those limited legal decisions will be on the authority to act form. I'll discuss more of the elements of that form. I'll show you how this form looks like further in this course. Bomb threat checklist. If you're working a mall property or a property, even an airport where there's a lot of high volume and you have dispatchers or security officers that answer the phone, bomb threats are more common than you might think. So there should be a checklist, some type of protocol on what to do if somebody calls and offers a high degree of threat. Your emergency action plan should be with the post orders. Further in this course, we will talk about emergency action plans, and I'll actually show you one. And a limitation of authority form should be in there as well. Limitation of authority form tells a client what our authority is, what we can and cannot do, and it answers the question of whether or not we should make private persons arrest. Part 4, Introduction to Government Bids. I highly recommend that you take a break, pause this video, walk around, stretch, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do to be more relaxed. We're going to be talking about government bids, but again, I want you to have a refreshed mind. The more refreshed you are, the more information that you're going to retain. And I'll see you when you get back. In this part of the presentation, we're going to talk about government bids and the evaluation process. In order to prepare myself to present this information to you, I evaluated about 10 proposals that turn into contracts. And these are all government, semi-government organizations. And this is what I found, that all of the request for proposals mentioned under the evaluation criteria that there was either going to be a percentage or a point system that was used. This is where you're going to get most of the points based on my research of the 10 different proposals that turn into contracts. They want to know about your experience with related work. If you're bidding on a park, maybe a recreation center, they're going to want you to have contract experience at a park or a recreation center or something that's similar or equivalent. So maybe it wasn't a recreation center that you have experience in or with. Maybe you have experience with park patrol where there is some recreation facilities, and a playground, if you explain it well enough, you can explain how a playground can be a recreation facility as well, as long as you explain and justify your stance on that. You're going to have between 3 to 5 years of contract experience for the bid you are proposing on. They're going to want to know what the management team's experience is. You're going to maybe need to produce a memo or a resume detailing your experience. And they're going to want to know what your employees' experience and training is. So let's just say you're bidding for a school district. Well, your management team should have experience providing security at a school, or maybe even a college or university, but some type of education environment. As for the employees, they're going to have that 3-day training for school security, the 24-hour class. At a very minimum, if you're going to bid for a school project, they should have that training. And perhaps I would beat out your competition by having your employees complete de-escalation training. Costs are weighed into the same category, and some organizations care more about the cost than others. If your cost exceeds what is expected, then you may not get a lot of percentage or points allocated to your bid. Deployment plan. They're going to want to know how well you address the scope of work. So the scope of work can be anywhere from 2 pages all the way up to 30 and even more. They're going to tell you in the request for proposal what exactly they need, what the issues are. And in your proposal, you're going to have to address every single item. You're going to have to tell the panel how you intend on solving the issues. Maybe you can solve the issues with technology in addition to your manpower. Maybe you have some technology that other bidders or other vendors do not have. Maybe there's a certain skill set that your employees have or that your upper management has. They want to know how well are you going to address the scope of work. Now, everything I just discussed, this is where you're going to get most of the points, and at least 50% of the evaluation criteria is going to be in items 1 through 3. I could almost guarantee that. This is where you're going to get a moderate level of points. References. They will check references. Your references are going to have to be able to corroborate your statement that you do have 3 to 5 years of contract experience in related work. Interview. You might have to sit in front of a panel and justify your organization. Make sure that you have somebody that is well spoken, somebody that's not afraid to speak in front of other people, somebody who is able to talk under stress. Your CEO of your organization or the actual owner might not be that person. This person might be highly intelligent, but you might need to even hire a public relations person to assist upper management with their interviewing skills. Because with some organizations, some people or some organizations, they want to have somebody that commands attention. Now, these are pass or fail categories. Government wants to know whether you're solvent or not. Okay, they're going to run a Duns and Bradstreet report and maybe even check you on the SAM database. They're going to want to know if you've been accused of fraud. They want to know if you filed for bankruptcy. And the Dun and Bradstreet report evaluates your credit worthiness. They might check that. They might check on your checkings and savings account. Are you using your checking and savings account as a personal account? I hope that there's no grocery store expenses in there, because that would look like it was something that's not business related. Well, maybe to you because you bought something that relates to the business, but to others, it looks like you're using your business account as a personal account. So you want to keep those two things separate. An FEIN number. Having an FEIN number is a lot more professional than having a Social Security number. And plus, some of this information here is public record. You don't want to have your Social Security number as public record, even though most of the time you can get that redacted. Now, for the following business enterprises, we're on number 7, you might be able to get some points, and we're talking about anywhere from 0 to 10% of the total score. Those of you who have honorably served our country, you might fall under the disabled veteran business enterprise. If you have a disability, remember your organization has to be 51% veteran owner. So if you got 2 owners, at least 51% of the business has to be owned by the disabled veteran. The organization might seek out a local hire, local business enterprise. If you are located in a particular city, that city might want only businesses. It only makes sense you hire within your community And that is the rationale that's used by many organizations. If you are an outsider, your business is located somewhere else, well, you might lose some points, but try to gain those points in numbers 1 through 3. And then even 4 through 5 is going to help you. You could still get this bid even if you're not in the city, if you're not located in the city. Those of you who have small business certification, it might help you a little bit. It might get you some more points. There's a 8A, there's a WOSB, Women's Owned Small Business, or a Hub Zone certification that you might want to seek under the Small Business Administration. Now, what most of these organizations entail is that one of the members, well, 51% of the owners are either a minority, they're a woman, or they are located in a disadvantaged zone. If you're either a 3, you might qualify for small business certification, and you might get somewhere between 0 to 10 points. I still think it's worth it if you fall under any of those categories. Everything I just discussed, it's not 100% accurate for every single government bid out there. This is a general presentation, and I can't cover every single portion of the bidding process because these items, number 1 through 7, are the most heavily evaluated portions of a proposal. I'm on the Los Angeles County Department of Public Social Services website, and in particular, I went to the Contract Opportunities page right here. Right here's the website address. And the neat thing about Department of Public Social Services is they post all of their contract opportunities here. So these are open solicitations. Remember, solicitations is another word for request for a proposal. They are soliciting proposals from you. That's why it's called solicitation. And these are all the contracts that are open right here. So we have armed and unarmed security guard services request, and case management systems, and that's it. Let's see if there's anything under closed solicitations. We typically want to look for security guard contracts here, and I do not see anything here. Okay, so let's go back here, and we're going to click here, which is armed and unarmed security guard services. Once again, as a reminder, I went here, dpsslacounty.gov, en, business contracts. If this website address changes, then remember, just go back to Department of Public Social Services, look for contract opportunities, and you might find a title of one of the web pages called Doing Business with Us, or maybe even Contract Opportunities. When I click on this, I will show you what we're going to get. Okay, we are on the request for proposal for armed and unarmed security guard services. This is the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Social Services. This document is actually 442 pages long. Look at all this. If you want to go through every single page, this can literally take you hours long to complete. If you're looking for multiple bids, then you're going to look through multiple requests for proposals, and you can actually make this a full-time job. I mean, there's so much time spent here if you read through every single page. The shortcut that I like to use is on most computers, you could just press the control button and then F. That's the find button. And it allows you to look for a specific word in a document. Okay. That's all it does. For those of you who have an Apple-based computer, you can press the command button and then you press the find button, the F. So it's command and F. But make sure that whatever computer system you're using, it allows you to search the entire document. Okay. Not all of these PDF documents or documents that are on a website allows you to search, but many are, and if they do, that's a plus, because you can just look for specific search terms. And the reason why we're doing that is we want to know whether or not this potential contract is even worth bidding for. So the first word we're going to type in is evaluation. And yes, you can go to the table of contents, which is right here, and it tells you what every page has. But some don't have a table of contents. And if they do, it's very brief. Very vague, very brief. Okay? So when we type in evaluation, let's see what we get. And this is so important because this is going to be the evaluation criteria. Most requests for proposals have an evaluation criteria that you have to be concerned about, because if you don't meet the requirements, why even keep reading through the contract, or I'm sorry, through the proposal? It's just a waste of time. Okay. Now, if you want to learn more about the request for proposals, it wouldn't be a waste of time, because you would review what every component has in a request for a proposal. And maybe in the future, you might want to bid on a similar contract. You're going to need to know what you have to accomplish within a specific time period. Okay, maybe you know that this contract for Department of Social Services is going to end in 3 or 4 years, and you want to be the next person to bid. Well, just look at the requirements. If they tell you you need 3 to 5 years of experience working in a social welfare office environment, well, that just means that you need to look for that type of work and spent 3 to 5 years contracting with such offices. Okay, so evaluation. Let's see what the criteria is. So it tells us to go to page 57. And I could just keep pressing the find button and then go through all 73, but I think it's faster if we just go to the page. Okay, so this is the selection criteria. It tells you what the selection process is. And there are some documents you're going to have to submit, and that's just pass or fail. Here we go. This is so important right here, you guys. This is the proposal evaluation and criteria. They're going to weigh 75% to everything in this category here. They're also going to give you 15% for your qualifications. Okay. Now, mind you, see where it says right here, business proposal evaluation criteria, 75%. Every percentage below that will add up to 75%. Okay, and then there will be a 25% certain criteria that has, or qualification that has to be met to meet that other 25%. But right here it's 75%. All these percentages are going to add up eventually to 75%. So the first thing is that your qualifications, they're going to give you 15% for that. Your approach to providing the required services is 25%. So you're going to have to describe in detail how are you going to address the scope of work. And we'll touch on scope of work in a minute in this proposal or request for proposal. Your staffing plan, they'll give you 15%. Your quality control, okay, how are you going to hire these people that are going to be servicing your contract? And that has a lot to do also with your guard's qualifications, okay? And then a living wage compliance plan, okay? They're going to go over whether or not you can comply with the livable wage. Okay, they're going to give you 10%. That's a lot. Okay, that's a lot. Now it says here 75% for the evaluation criteria in all of these categories that we just discussed. Remember, in the couple of slides beforehand, I mentioned that your qualifications and references are, well, and your guards qualifications are at least 50%, but here it's 75%. Okay, so it just depends on the type of contract, but it just shows you that there's a lot of weight that is assigned to qualifications, your guards qualifications, how well you address the scope of work with a strategic plan, and references also. Okay, and we're going to go back to this page in a minute, but let's talk about references. So let's use the find key to see if are we going to have to provide any references. And remember, early in the presentation, I did mention that many contracts that are government related require you to have between 3 to 5 references. Okay, so let's see what it talks about references here, or let's see if it even discusses that. Look at this. Under proposers, minimum qualifications, you got to have 5 years experience within the last 7 years, providing both armed and unarmed security services that are equivalent or substantially similar to the services identified in Appendix A, and that is the Department of Social Services. Perhaps you need that experience in dealing or handling mental health patients or working in a mental health atmosphere. Okay, and you're going to have experience having a total of 250 guards at all times in one or multiple locations. Okay, not everybody can bid on this contract because not everybody has 250 guards. If you have 250 guards, you're doing something right. Okay, and it says here the proposer, and the proposer is a word that is used in this particular document. It's a word that defines an offerer, and an offerer is the same as the bidder. Okay, so this is you as a private patrol operator looking for a prospective contract, but it does say that you're going to have to provide references. Okay, all right, let's go back to that page that we were on earlier, and I think it was 56. Okay, so we're back on 56. We talked about 75% of the evaluation criteria goes to all of these factors here. Look, it even talks about your finances, proposer's financial capability, your staffing plan, your quality control plan. The livable wage is 10%. Okay. Cost. Early in the presentation, I mentioned cost. It's going to vary, but many times it's close to about 20%. Sometimes a little bit higher, and then sometimes a little bit lower. But cost is really important, and sometimes it can go up to 40% as well. Okay, it just depends on what the agency wants. So they're assigning 75% for everything we just discussed, and then they're tacking on 25% here to the to the cost proposal. Okay, what is your proposal to save cost, reduce costs, and what are your numbers? Okay, what is your billing rate? Okay, that's going to give you 25%. See, the thing is this: if your cost is only maybe 5% weighted in this evaluation, don't spend too much time on your cost. Okay, you got to concentrate on other things, such as your experience, the experience of your guards, your strategic solution to addressing issues that are mentioned in this 400-page contract. Okay, and then once this proposal becomes an actual contract, that's public record. It's public record, and it's something that you should definitely seek in a California Public Records Act. Okay, it's going to give you the vendor's strategic plan. It's also going to give you the billing rates as well. Okay, so the next thing that we need to look up is the scope of work. So we're going to press our lovely button, Control and F. Oh, we did already. It's called Scope of Work. Okay, so that's page 67. Okay, it says here that you're going to be responsible for providing security at 64 offices. That's a lot of offices, you guys. There's 6 zones that are going to require armed and unarmed security, and then these are all the zones. This is the north sector, south sector. This is a huge contract. Okay, and I'm not going to stop and discuss every single thing that's needed in the scope of work, but I'm just going to scroll down so you can just briefly look at what the scope of work would entail in this specific contract. You're going to also have to do performance evaluation meetings. Okay, the county's going to meet up with you guys and discuss how you are servicing your contract, whether it's satisfactory or not. It says here if you don't attend, it looks like you get a $1,000 fine. All right. Talks about the hours and days of the operation. This is the kind of schedule that is going to be needed. And then remember, you're going to have guards that are willing to work the schedule. Staffing plans. And it says here what to do when there's unscheduled work due to a security incident. Talks about overtime. The scope of work is just voluminous, but you need to if you're going to actually bid on this, you're going to need to make sure that you're able to actually carry out the scope of work. You're able to do what is asked of you in this contract. Okay, requirements. Let's see what the requirements are. Requirement. Okay, these are going to be all of the requirements here. Every item that is discussed here is a requirement. Okay, they're even telling you that you will be adhering to the county's child support compliance program. But everything here, you even have to join or actually have an injury and illness prevention program. Okay, protest policy, a jury service program. Okay, you're gonna have to give your employees time off for voting. There's a certain proposer's charitable contributions compliance program. This is a lot. And look at this here. You have to use recycled bond paper. Okay, recycled bond paper. I'm gonna actually look this up. Okay, so that's on page 14. And The only reason why I'm showing you page 14 is to show you that everything on here, it's required. Okay. So if you want this contract, okay, you gotta use recycled bond paper. Okay. If you gotta submit anything in writing, I also recommend, and then submit something by hand or by mail. And I'm not talking about email, by hand. You need, or you should use recycled bond paper. Okay. You're gonna even have to comply with the safety, surrender, and baby law. And there's so many other things that you have to comply with. Okay. And that's it for the review of Department of Social Services request for proposal, 442 pages. Bottom line is this: use the whatever you do, do not get discouraged. It just takes a lot of time in order for you to be able to bid on government projects. Just keep motivated. Just keep working on your business if you're not there yet, if you're not eligible yet. So let's just say you're in Los Angeles, or you want to get into Los Angeles. This is a huge city. There's a lot of opportunities here. How do you get to that level? Well, first off, everything that we went over in this whole presentation on government bids and government contracts, this is also going to help you gain a good understanding on the private bids. And it's going to help you develop billing rates. And it helps you understand what great information you need to include in a proposal. So just don't think that everything is lost, because it's not. So let's just say you want to get to Los Angeles, you want to get some nice government contracts there. How do you get there if you have no experience at all? You don't have those 3 to 5 years of related experience. I'll show you what. You want to get Los Angeles? Start off in the smallest towns, smallest jurisdictions. There's a city in California. It's called Amador City. It was incorporated in 1915. This is actually an old gold town. There's not a lot of people living here. This is the least populated town. After the gold rush, everybody started moving out. There's a lot of historical sites here. Great things, but just imagine if you just get a small contract here, this is going to open the doors to bigger contracts like those in Los Angeles, okay? Go out there, look for cities or jurisdictions that don't have an online request for proposal system. And don't be hesitant to just make cold calls to these city clerk's offices or even these procurement offices. Just reach out and ask them, hey, are there any bids for any security service projects? And what's to say that you can't volunteer? What if there's a park that has a problem? What if you just get a contract signed with the city that you provide security services for free, okay, during these days and these times, and you develop a good network with those people in City Hall, okay? Maybe towards the end of this contract that's volunteer, maybe they'll write you a letter of recommendation, or maybe they'll allow you to use you as a reference when you bid on the bigger contracts. Now, mind you, just as a disclosure, some of these bigger contracts, they're going to want you to service a city that has a particular, or a population that has a particular amount of people, or an area of patrol that is a likewise size. That is my only disclaimer. Always, I recommend look at all the requests for proposals for the big contracts and just see what is required. If they just say, well, we need you to have experience contracting with the city, and there's no other particulars given, well, find that Amador City out there, okay, the smaller cities, and they'll definitely like your service. When you're trying to look up requests for proposals, the search terms that you generally want to use is this: RFP security guard services, and then whatever county you happen to be in or whatever area you like to service, you just add in a city. So here we'll put, let's see if anything for Pomona pops up. Here we go. Request for proposal. This is actually something new. During my preparation for this presentation, I didn't know that this is going to pop up, but look at RFP for security guard services at Tri-City Mental Health. Okay. There looks like there's something here for citywide security guard services, City Pomona. And mind you, I didn't type in City Pomona before I even went on this Google search. This is DPSS, that's Department of most likely Social Services in Los Angeles County. Look at, we have one for Costa Mesa. This is 2019. And this one is for, see how it says org, it's probably a nonprofit. Oh, it's a transit company, but this is 2018. But look, we typed in RFP, Security Guard Services, and then we added a name of a city. You can put the state if you want, but I think if you just type in the city, you'll have the same results. Unless you put in Ontario, because see, you might get something for Ontario, Canada, and then remember there's Ontario, California. So we're getting the same things popping up. Same requests for proposals. Another search term that we should work with is security guard proposal request, and then word bid. And I gotta be fair to those who work in Fresno. I don't want to only include Southern California people, but we'll put Fresno, okay? Let's see what pops up. Okay, I mean, this is 2017. Unarmed Security Guard Services, Fresno, EOC. Okay, and this one actually looks like it's City of Fresno. These are probably older bids. But it's really, the older bids is also important because it allows us to review what an agency or government entity would most likely seek in a proposal. Okay, so security guard proposal request bid Fresno. That's a language that we can also use. Let's move on to government bids and market intelligence. Let's discuss right now why it's so important. Well, researching historical proposals are effective in learning their current trends, your competitors' billing rates, what the livable wage rates are, any operating expenses that your competitors might need. All these things help you assess your own billing rate. It's intelligence. It also tells you what your competitors' resources are. Do they have some particular software that most people don't have? Is this something that you might need to eventually purchase if you want to remain competitive? And what I really like, you guys, is that in these proposals, your competitors' problem-solving strategies are in there. So you have the 2 to 30 pages of scope of work, and then you might have 10 or 15 or 30 pages or even 100 pages of strategies on how the scope of work is going to be addressed. You might not win that bid this time, but for the next bid, you're going to be more prepared than ever. Okay, and normally you can't see what your competitor's proposal is until after the bidding process. And most of the time, again, depending on what the state or federal laws are at the time, you might only be able to view a competitor's winning proposal. You also get to learn about your competitor's strategic planning process and the scope of work, just like I mentioned, that are in. As an ongoing reminder, whenever I say the word bid, I'm also referring interchangeably to the word offer or proposal, just as a reminder. Some of you want legal authority whenever there's a discussion about whether or not you can do something. And that's what this course is all about. It's about the facts. It's about providing legal authority for something that I mentioned. And because market intelligence is so important, you might be inclined to use this legal authority to gather the information that you need, right? On the state side of California, just as I mentioned seconds ago, you cannot get access to a competitor's bid before the bid has been accepted. You may access, however, this information when the intent to award is issued. Intent to award. And the intent to award gives the public notice that the agency intends to award the bid to a particular offeror, and that's a fancy name for bidder, and time to object. When the bid is over and the agency accepts the bid, then through the California Public Records Act request, and that's Government Code 6250 through 6270.7, you can get access to the unredacted winning proposal document. Now, sometimes there might be some redaction if there's confidential information in there, maybe somebody's social security number or maybe a home address in there. If for some reason it's left in there, the person giving the proposal has an option most of the time to redact that information if it is ever made public. So it's not totally unredacted. Now, if another competitor was unsuccessful, you may or not get legal access depending on whether the bid package was opened by the agency or not, and whether any portions were requested as confidential. There's a Supreme Court case in California called Michaelis Montarani Johnson versus Superior Court. It's a 2006 case. And this is what it tells us. This is what the California justices said. They said this, and I'm going to quote them. Public disclosure of such proposals properly may await conclusion of the agency's negotiation process, occurring before the agency's recommendation is finally approved by the awarding authority. It's clear as mud. There's nothing more to explain on that subject. There's also the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA. This is the federal version of the California Public Records Act. And proposals are usually not readily available without a public record request, but contracts are. And again, it just depends on whether this is a contract involving a California government organization or a federal organization. California organizations are a lot more lenient to provide you public records than the federal government. And what you might need to do is you might need to hire an attorney or private investigator because specific language may be needed to locate a proposal and to request a copy. Certain private investigators and attorneys know the exact language to use. If you do not give particulars with regards to a particular proposal or a contract number, if you don't provide a contract number or the date or the title of the request for proposal, you may not get that information. the public agency might kick back your request to you and tell you that there's not enough sufficient information to conduct a search. And that's why you might need to hire a private investigator or an attorney. You can always do this yourself. You just have to research what is the language that the agency is looking for. And this can be very time consuming. As for searching online, maybe through some type of search engine, you want to try to type in RFP Security Guard Services, Request for Proposal Security Guard Services, and then the name of the jurisdiction. And then also you could put a search engine inquiry for Security Guard Proposal Request Bid, and then enter the name of the jurisdiction. And as discussed earlier in this presentation, you can go to the California Cal E-Procure website, and here's the address. And then for awarded contracts, the keyword, even if you want to go to Google or other search engine, is to type in State Leveraged Procurement Agreements, LPA, or Master Agreement. And then for federal contracts, https beta.sam.gov. And for awarded contracts, the keywords to put into a search engine or even search on the SAM database is reports on acquisition awards. Keywords, key phrases is so important when you're trying to look up these proposals for market intelligence. So we have the sam.gov website in front of us. Make sure that you type in the right website address. It's beta.sam.gov. Notice that the beta version is the newer version of the sam.gov webpage. And what I notice is there is a lot of information missing, especially a lot of the contract award information. The agreements for the federal government, sometimes they could run over 500 pages, under 400 pages. That is not uncommon for a federally awarded contract. But this is the page, the website. This is the marketplace if you want to look for current bids. So right here, if you are looking for a contract opportunity, you would click contract opportunities. If you want to just look for award data, so for example, you want to look up what the specifics are in the contract, you want to know how much the company is paying their security officers, if you want to also know if there are mandatory benefits or anything else that the employer, meaning the federal government, requires, then you go to all award data. Also, let's just say that you're walking around a courtroom or you're driving by a federal building and you notice a particular security company that is protecting the facility. If you're interested in knowing how much the federal government pays this security guard company, because you might want to put in a similar bid, or you just want to know what the current value is, or what you have to pay, or what you should be paying your private security officers, what the reasonable wages are, you can definitely look into these contracts. For the federal government, private security guards are generally paid a lot more. And that is the nature of federal work. Security guards usually get paid more. State, county level, city level, school districts, they are generally paid less. And I think one of the reasons is to prevent corruption. And I think the theory is that if you pay a security guard a higher than normal wage, this person is less likely going to engage in some corruption practices. And that thesis is definitely debatable. So let's just say you've seen the Paragon Systems company patrolling or providing security at a courthouse. Just make sure that you spell their company name right. Paragon, a very successful company. They have a lot of federal contracts. So click here, and the search results have been populated. Okay, so this is all the contracts that they've been awarded. And right here is a unique entity ID number. This is really important because let's just say you want to do a Freedom of Information Act on that particular company. One way to identify the company is through the DUNS number. And the DUNS number, if you recall, is a Duns and Bradstreet number. It's a number that's issued by the DUNS company. And what it is it's a system that this company has in place, and it's a private system to give a company certain credit worthiness, and that's all it is. There's some background checks that are done with regards to how worthy they are as a company, and they're issued this DUNS number right here. Okay, it even gives you the address, and see, notice that the address it's cut off. I mean, it's cut off because I think the system is new, and there's definitely some glitches, just like in any other system. So let's click on this here. Okay, it talks about that this is Department of Justice, U.S. Marshals Service. They got a contract. The base and all options value of this contract is over, geez, $138 million. I mean, this is a huge contract, $138 million contract. And as we scroll down here, usually if you want to review the actual contract, the 400 or 500 pages, there'd be attachment here, but this is missing. And I was going through a lot of these security companies that won bids on the betasam.gov website, and a lot of the links, attachments were missing. All that means is that you're going to have to put a Freedom of Information Act for that particular contract. Okay, and here's the primary point of contact for this contract. Maybe if you have some questions for them. And the pre-solicitation, this is really the only thing that there is here that we can actually download. So this is the preliminary negotiation phase. This is possibly the proposal. But if you click on this, you're not going to be really led on anything that's going to help you form a bid or help you understand what the market value is for a particular market in a particular location. And then here it says award notice. This is just the date that the contract was awarded. And right here, see where it says contract award number and the contract award date. And then here we have the DUNS number, Paradigm Systems, and then this is their address. That's not cut off this time. All this information is great because if we need to put a Freedom of Information Act, all we could do is, we could actually copy this, paste it on a Freedom of Information Act request, and send it to the Department of Justice, because they are the agency that contracted with this company, and ask for the entire contract. Now you're going to have to pay for that. It could be up to, this can easily be $200. You're going to have to pay for somebody to scan the copies, somebody to redact any confidential information in the contract. That costs money too. And then you're going to have to pay per page if it's not here. Now, many times when somebody asks for a Freedom of Information Act request on a particular contract, many times the federal government will just put it here under attachments, because they don't want to keep having to hire somebody or actually retain an employee for a particular time frame just to keep scanning documents and responding to you. So they know that there might be multiple requests for somebody to review the contract, so they might just paste it right here, they may just upload it and make it an attachment. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't happened here, especially when you consider that this web page is brand new, or it's a newer web page. Okay, but all this information here you can use on your Freedom of Information Act, and then you're going to contact Department of Justice for that particular contract. You might need a private investigator to do it for you. You might need an attorney, and the reason why I say that is because the request has to be made in specifics. You have to give specific contract award number, specific dates. If you're not specific, then the government is just going to tell you, well, there's not enough information to find this contract. Okay, so this is SAM Beta Gov. site. And then if we scroll back, we can actually look up contract opportunities. So let's just say if you wanted to bid on a federal contract, I recommend that you type in security guard. Notice of intent, all that means is that the federal government is planning on giving a contract to a particular vendor, and you might have a little bit of time to appeal the decision. Okay. Right here, Navy Region Northwest Security Guard Services. This looks like there was a solicitation, or a solicitation also means a request for a proposal. Okay, the federal government just names things a little bit more differently. All right, let's scroll down, see what we have here. Here's another opportunity here, contract opportunity. There's a description, and the RFQ, that's request for proposal, request for, actually it's usually RFP, but this is basically the same, similar questions that they would ask you in a request for proposal. Federal government just calls things a lot differently sometimes. And then the instruction sheet. This can be hundreds of pages long, by the way. But this is all the information that you need to download in order for you to provide a bid to the federal government. Okay, and here's some contact information for you. And then they even tell you what the current history of this particular request for proposal is. Okay, and in here you can actually learn what the requirements are as well. Okay, so that's how you find a bid opportunity. Once again, this is the website address right here. Here's some other options that you might want to consider instead of just looking for requests for proposals on different government websites or by calling the government organization's procurement office. You can subscribe to private databases, and I'm going to name a few of them that are popular. One of them is governmentbids.com. Another is bidnet.com, bidsearch.com, and findrfp.com. You're going to have to pay for a subscription service. I don't give specific numbers here, but they obviously will range from $50 all the way up to $400 to $500 a month. It just depends on which database you use. It sounds like it's something pricey, but the good thing is that these private databases, they actually collect all of the requests for proposals in a certain jurisdiction, certain state, and they send you email alerts. This actually might end up working out for you if you want to pay those subscription fees. If you know the language of the industry, you're going to get so much more farther when you conduct market intelligence. Try visiting a jurisdiction's procurement division, and I put procurement in quotes, and city clerk or county clerk, and search or ask for RFPs. Notice every important term I put in bold and I put in quotation marks. These are the words that you have to ask, the specific words. Know the words of the industry, and you're going to get a lot more farther from market intelligence. I can't say this enough. When you want to learn about or get intelligence for an awarded contract, then you're going to ask for awarded contracts or agreements. Hi, I'd like to get some information about a contract, an awarded contract that was awarded 2 months ago. And obviously you got to give more specifics. What type of contract is it? Do you have the bid number, the procurement number? And remember, the word agreement is the same thing as contracts. So you can even ask about awarded contracts or ask about awarded agreements. It's the same thing. We need to have a serious discussion on ethics. All that hard work that you put into your private patrol operator company can just be going into the deep abyss if you violate a state or federal ethical code. I think there's a handful of times where there are private patrol operators that engage in certain activity, and they may have a hunch that maybe it's wrong, but they're not really aware of the state and federal codes that pertain to ethics. That's why in this presentation, we're going to discuss what common violations are out there. And we're going to dive in deep into the specific codes. There's California Labor Code 2810. I'm going to read it verbatim because it's so important. You can actually be found guilty under a conspiracy theory. So although it appears that this code pertains to the other party that's not you, under conspiracy theory, you can be held liable under this code. It says this: a person or entity may not enter into a contract or agreement for labor or services with a security guard contractor, where the person or entity knows or should know that the contract or agreement does not include funds sufficient to allow the contractor to comply with all applicable local, state, and federal laws or regulations governing the labor or services to be provided. You have to have sufficient money in your bank account, in the business bank account. If you don't, well, that's an illegal bid that you're making. Okay? If that bid turns into agreement, okay, you cannot agree to this bid. You need to understand the Sherman Act of 1890. It's an antitrust law. It's a federal law, by the way, and it prohibits any agreement among competitors to fix prices, rig bids, or engage in other anti-competitive activity. And the maximum fine is $100 million for corporations and $1 million for individuals, and the maximum jail sentence is 10 years. Under some circumstances, the maximum potential fine may be increased to twice the gain or loss involved. Civil recovery can be up to 3 times the amount of damages. And violation may also constitute a mail or wire fraud violation. Who investigates the Sherman Act of 1890? Well, the FBI's Antitrust Division does. Here are some different versions of violations of the Antitrust Act. There's price fixing, there's big rigging, and other collusive agreements. And all the federal government has to do is establish that you committed these offenses by direct evidence. That could possibly mean testimony of a participant or circumstantial evidence, such as suspicious bid patterns, travel reports, expense reports, telephone records. Mind you, you typically need a search warrant for any of these. So the government will need to produce that in order they want to get that from you, by the way. Business diary entries. There's something called price fixing. It's a form of collusion, and that is agreement among competitors to raise, fix, or otherwise maintain the price at which their goods or services are sold. Let me give you some examples. When you establish or adhere to price discounts, hold prices firm, you eliminate or reduce discounts, adopt a standard formula for computing prices, maintain certain price differentials between different types, sizes, or quantities of products. You adhere to a minimum fee or price schedule. You fix credit terms. By the way, these are not exclusive examples. You have to look at the totality of the circumstances. You have to look at all of the facts. Let's continue. Not advertise prices. So here's a Department of Justice newsletter. And it tells you here that a Long Island defense contractor employee pleads guilty to bid rigging and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Okay, so let's talk about what bid rigging is. It's when competitors agree in advance who will submit the winning bid on a contract through a competitive bidding process. What about bid suppression? That's when one or more competitors who otherwise would be expected to bid or who have previously bid agree to refrain from bidding or withdraw a previously submitted bid so that the designated winning competitor's bid will be accepted. This is bid rigging, bid suppression. Any one of us can make these errors. It's possible, and some of us might not even know what bid rigging or suppression is. We might have a feeling that it's wrong or unethical, but we're not totally sure if this is something against the law. But after this presentation, you're going to be more confident in knowing what kind of activity you can or cannot engage in when you're seeking out these bids. So in bid rigging, there's something called also complementary bidding, and that's the most frequently form of bid rigging. And it's when competitors agree to submit bids that either are too high to be accepted or contain special terms that will not be accepted to the buyer. And such bids are not intended to secure the buyer's acceptance, but are merely designed to give the appearance of genuine competitive bidding. It's almost like you're reaching out to a couple of your colleagues or good friends, and you're having one of them submit a high bid, another a low bid, and you all agree to get some of the profit or different portions of the profit when you win the bid. It's something that is called complementary bidding. This is a form of bid rigging. This is collusion. There's something called bid rotation, and that's when conspirators submit bids but take turns being the low bidder. The terms of rotation may vary. So, for example, competitors may take turns on contracts according to the size of the contract and allocating equal amounts to each conspirator or allocating volumes that correspond to the size of each conspirator company. Here's another form of bid rigging. It's called subcontracting in the context I'm going to describe right now. It's when competitors who agree not to bid or to submit a losing bid frequently receive contracts or supply contracts in exchange from the successful low bidder. And in some schemes, a low bidder will agree to withdraw its bid in favor of the next low bidder in exchange for a lucrative subcontract that divides the illegally obtained higher price between them. Here's some possible indicators of collusion, according to the Department of Justice. Vendors are charging higher prices to local customers than to distant customers. Prices stay identical for long periods of time. Prices previously were different. Prices increase do not appear to be supported by increased cost. A company requests a bid package for itself and a competitor. Come on, that's not enough. That's not a gimme right there, you guys. Come on, you request a bid for yourself and then your competitor. Come on. A company submits a bid when it is incapable of successfully performing the contract. Let's talk about the perfect storm for collusion. There's a few number of vendors. There's a large number of vendors, but a small amount typically control the market. There's restricted specifications for the vendor. There's a standardized RFP, request for proposal. Repetitive bids, contracts. Competitors know each other well through social connections, trade associations, shifting employment from one company to another, maybe legitimate business contacts. And bidders who congregate in the same city, building, or town. Here's a resource. Let's just say that you believe that there's some type of unethical violation regarding a government bid. You could contact the Citizen Complaint Center of the Antitrust Division of the FBI. I have an email here, a phone number, and then an address if you want to even write to them. And the information that I obtained for this presentation is from the newsletter on the right, and the title is Price Fixing, Bid Rigging, and Market Allocation Schemes, What They Are and What to Look For. This is directly from the Department of Justice, FBI. To your left is a website address of that particular document. I highly recommend that you review that document, especially if you are talking, if you plan on talking to a friend about an upcoming bid and that friend also has a security company and that friend is interested in also bidding, both of you guys will be bidding. I highly recommend that you read this document. I highly recommend that you review this portion of the course again. Now, I might not cover every single part of ethical violations, but I think I covered the bulk of it. Okay. Hopefully, right now at this point in time, you have a greater understanding of unethical violations pertaining to the government bidding process. We have spent so much time together. We're talking about just on bids and proposals, a good 3 hours and 20 to 30 minutes. That's a lot of time. We started off with talking about how to gather labor market intelligence. In other words, I showed you guys how to find out what the most current wages are in your area. What should you be paying security guards in a particular jurisdiction? We went in great detail on how to create a bid. We talked about proposals. We talked about contracts. We talked about the elements of a good proposal. We talked about what the elements are of a contract. We also talked about, we actually went deep into market intelligence. I showed you guys how to use different websites, different government sites. I showed you how to read contracts, how to read proposals. It's so important. By reading these proposals and then these agreements, we're able to understand what your competitors out there are offering. We're able to understand what their overhead costs are. We're able to understand what benefits, if any, are they paying their employees. We're able to understand what their current billing rates are. And by understanding what the intelligence is, by deciphering the information that you need, your billing rates, when you propose them to your clients, they're going to be more accurate. They're going to be more competitive. You also learned how to not commit any ethical violations. We went over the Sherman Act. We went over a state labor code. I even showed you guys an article of somebody, of a defense contractor that was actually prosecuted for bid rigging. By having all this information that we covered in over 3 hours of instruction, you're going to be in a more competitive field. You're going to be able to have that advantage over your competitor. Those of you who are planning on only seeking private bids, you have the marketing intelligence skills as of now after watching this video, applying what you learn to the world out there. You're able to justify a certain billing rate now. You may not be out there bidding for government contracts, but now you should understand the justification behind every single dollar that you put into that billing rate. Those of you who eventually want to get government contracts, now you're able to understand that there are certain requirements that have to be met in order for you to even start bidding on these projects. And maybe you won't be wasting your time with researching recent contracts that come out, or even subscribing to a subscription service that looks for these requests for proposals. And you know that because there's certain time requirements have to be met. Most government contracts require you to have 3 to 5 years of similar experience to the contract in which you plan on submitting a proposal to. Okay? Hope this video helps you understand all the process involved in proposals, biddings, and ethics. Let's move on to the next presentation.